John.
Welcome back, everyone. This is a very good day for me, of course, as we have our great friend, Matt LaCroix. Welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, Will, it's always a pleasure to have these conversations. I think you and I have probably done more shows than anybody else I've ever worked with. And for people that don't know, actually listening to this, you and I almost have crossed like two different thresholds with two different TV shows that we almost ended up going down together, where we would be exploring ancient mysteries and you'd be like the one kind of asking the questions that the audience would want to know. And so we had almost done that a couple times, and we won't mention what channel or who that is for. But we have a long-term kind of good relationship in terms of that kind of banter and going back and forth. So as always, Will, I couldn't think of a better place to do such a monumentally important presentation as with you, my friend, today.
This is historic. And by the way, also what you're saying with the TV shows and all this stuff, guys, it's going to happen. Okay, let's be real. It is going to happen one of these days. It's a when question, not an if. But as Matt's saying, this is a historic episode that we have, and we've done plenty, and I know they've all been very popular with all of you guys, both my followers and Matt's as well. And so I want to get straight into this, because this is not just the work of a bunch of weeks, months, a couple of years. This is some life work material that we're about to get into. And you're going to be answering some of the questions that I've been digging. And one of the parts of the reasons that I've even started the podcast is to answer some of these deep questions and talk to people who are going to really dig in, go out, get on the ground, and make sense out of everything that we have. And so with that, maybe you just want to give us a little bit of an understanding of where we're headed, and then we want to dive straight into this presentation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, because you just brought it up in a second ago when you were talking, what has emerged, I'm going to sort of jump really quick to the very end just for a second, and then we'll go back for a minute. What has now emerged after all of this time is this term that I have coined that I'm starting to spread. It's called citizen archaeologist. And that is referring to anyone listening to this who has an eye and is studied, can literally make discoveries. And I'm not saying that necessarily in relation to me. We just had this Iranian woman named Samia, who found another huge part of this connection and discovery in Persepolis in Iran. So she's Iranian, just because she read the book and she is studying this code, this pattern. So what I mean is that what we're starting here is like a new renaissance. It's like a revolution in science and thinking. And because why? Well, we're in this world, and we'll set this up right now. We're in this world where we have been told that certain things are true and reality is this way. Our history is this way. We are this way, all of these things. And you know what? People are pretty fed up of the old story now. You can see it all over the world rippling, where people want more because there is so much more. What relationship do we have with the earth? What relationship do we have with the universe? What relationship, more specifically, did the ancient lost civilizations have with the earth and the universe? And maybe we can learn a lot more by looking back than we can just looking forward. And that is where this entire thing is going to go today, is that not only are we going to start by proving that the entire lost civilization debate is over and do dating and all of that fun stuff, but we're going to go about 1,000 miles in the other direction. And we're going to go into discoveries and paradigm shifting information from these things that have emerged that literally will reshape everything. And I mean that. This is not some kind of a grandiose statement that doesn't have anything to back it up by. This is something that will alter humanity, and it touches every single aspect of our lives. And I guess I'll start here, is that I never ever imagined on this journey, Will, which was, I guess you'd have to try to figure out when you would decide when the beginning point is, because that's sort of hard to figure out. But let's say conservatively, at least 2 years, of exploring something that I didn't actually fully understand what it was. And for me, here we are in this moment where you and I have done so many shows with the very simple question of, who are we, and do we have an entire lost chapter in our history, in our past? And so here we are trying to prove that, right, all the way through this line, and other non-academics and some academics, right, archaeologists are now coming forward, and geologists, to challenge the old paradigm. And so we started this journey with just trying to prove that lost civilizations existed. And what came out of that, I never would have ever imagined. And so that's where we are now, Will.
I love that. And the fact that everyone has picked up, because this is another thing. We've been asking these questions. We almost always, in every single one of our shows, ask, why isn't everyone talking about this? Because if it's true, right, then this is front page news all the time. Well, guess what, everyone? Guess who's all over the Sun and what, the New York Post and the Daily Mail, okay, and this, that. It's picking up, all right? And not even picking up. It's starting to pick up some quality attention. It's because finally it can't be ignored. And so I'm excited. I know everybody else is. Let's dig straight into it.
All right. Well, this is a long presentation. So if anybody needs to go get something to drink, again, a little snack, this is quite a journey. It is almost 70 slides, and pretty much everything has been custom designed over the last 2 months of this. So buckle in. We'll jump into this whole thing, how it started, what the implications are, basically the entire workshop for what I'm calling, the ancient code of a lost civilization, or the blueprint. Now, this is the first image, is of course, where it all began. This is nearly 2 years ago at a site called Chavuz Tepe, and I always had this deep inner knowing that these were very important. These giant T-pillars, these beautiful, finely cut basalt T-pillars that are somewhere between 5 and 7 tons each. Just incredible. But I never could have imagined what I would discover with them down the road. So, Will, here we are. We're at this point where modern academia, and we're taught in school, and the world we know is that ancient civilizations and civilization itself emerged 6,500 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, and that everything before that is hunter-gatherers, nomadic cultures. But not only that, within that 6,500 year window of civilizations, there is not supposed to be any cross connection between them. No similar building styles, no sharing of knowledge, no maritime connections, nothing. So the first thing is, not only are we disproving that, but it's not even from that same time period at all. It's not from Iron and Bronze Age cultures. What we're looking at are the telltale signatures of a truly lost ancient civilization that had capabilities of building and moving stone and molding stone and doing things that we still don't understand today. And so what I'm showing on the screen is that the first image is, you have those massive stone blocks at Ollantaytambo that are beyond comprehension, mind-blowing if anyone's ever been there. And of course, Turkey, this is below Ionis. You have just the very similar stonework you see throughout Peru, with the fine fitting and the L cuts, and even the knobs that stick out. And of course, the Coricancha in Peru. You talk about similar designs in architecture. It is something that cannot be denied any longer. It's something that can't be ignored. And the first place that usually people start is saying, wow, look, that stonework is pretty similar. Well, we're going to go a lot further than that, because what we're going to do is prove that there's an entire lost chapter of our history, one that defined who we are, that we have long since forgotten.
Can I just to clarify, so that we all are under the perfect general understanding? Conventional wisdom states that 6,500 years ago, more or less, we got started with our real big push as a civilization to have cities and structures and organizations the way that we generally do now, let's say. And there was never, according to mainstream conventional science, a civilization that could possibly span this level, this map that you're showing me. There's absolutely no way that there could have been any relation between any civilization that could have spanned from Bolivia all the way to Cambodia, Turkey, Egypt, etc. And so that is what the mainstream scientific stance is right now, correct?
That, yes. So that there's not supposed to be any connection between ancient cultures around the world. But during that time period, even of 6,500 years ago up until, the last couple thousand years. But what's more important even than that is not only are they not supposed to have a connection, but there's not supposed to be any chapter of human history that is far before that. Something that gets into what they consider Neolithic, hunter-gatherer time periods. And that is what we're about to shake open, and really it's really like opening up Pandora's box, because not only do we redefine an entire chapter of human history that we have forgotten largely, but it redefines everything, including who we are. And that is what's so dangerous about this information, is that it literally challenges everything that we've ever been taught well.
Awesome.
So this journey of, we'll call them hotspots. So these stars on the map are not the only places that there's lost civilization evidence, of course. But what they are these hotspots that have the same symbols, the same stonework that carries over around the world on 3 continents. And that's what we're going to start by exploring. Because when you go down this road, it truly is a rabbit hole, because instead of only going up, we're also going to be going down. Now, I want to give just a little bit of a brief summary of this area before we get into all the new stuff, because in order to tell this story correctly and understand, we have to start at the beginning. And the beginning is not where a lot of people might think it would be. The beginning is with a very mysterious civilization that built the cities from Eridu to Shuruppak, a time period in which ancient Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets describe as being the birth of civilization. Now, the real question, though, is when was that birth? And what I have found is evidence to strongly support that what we think of as the original Sumerians, the ones that include figures like Ziusudra, are actually from a completely different time period than we know. And they're not at all from the time period that mainstream academia and archaeologists tell us. Now, I had begun this journey, Will, and we have had so many good conversations with talking about the hero of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis and the story of Ziusudra and the great flood, the deluge, and trying to understand how this chapter has anything to do with lost history. Well, that journey was something that I had been exploring without actually understanding what it fully was. So we had identified this flood hero Ziusudra, the original figure that became Noah in the Christian traditions, Hebrew and Christian traditions. And his original 2 names was Ziusudra and Untapishtim. Now, this character is mysterious. He's a great sage and a priest, and he was the last king of an ancient city called Shuruppak. Now, for anyone who knows my work and has seen over the last couple of years, I've talked a lot about this. That's not new. But what is new comes out of that understanding. And so we do need to understand the time periods, the differences that basically had shaped this world, and how it had also shaped our early stories, and where it began long before Abrahamic religions and long before even Gilgamesh. And that's the part we're really going to get into, which I think is very interesting. So, Will, you remember our conversations with the 1931 excavations from Penn Museum, where they went to a place called Tel Farah, Iraq, and they believed they had evidence to support finding a mythical city called Shuruppak, which is very interesting because traditionally, if you look up Shuruppak, it's still considered a myth, not real. And yet, here they are in the middle of the desert on an archaeological dig to find a mythical city that's not supposed to be real at all. That's the first place you scratch your head and kind of wonder, if it's not real, then why are they putting all that money and effort into it, right? Well, isn't that strange?
Classic, yeah.
So they get there, they have to deal with sandstorms that almost destroy the expedition for days, and they start digging in this area called Tel Farah. Well, at the very top is Tel Farah. Just below the surface, they find crude pottery and things like that. Well, 6 to 7 feet down, they find what's called stratum layer number 2, which is the time period of Uruk and Gilgamesh. Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind as we're moving forward, because what you're about to see is shocking evidence that basically is going to completely destroy the old narrative of history. Now, that layer right there with the arrow, 6 to 7 feet down, that's the Uruk and Gilgamesh time period, is what modern academia and archaeology as a whole tells us is the beginning of civilization. Remember that. Uruk and Gilgamesh. They don't talk about Sumerians. They don't talk about Eridu to Shuruppak. They don't talk about that being the rise of civilization. They talk about the rise of civilization, according to the mainstream, being in Uruk with Gilgamesh. Now, there's a problem with that, because as they dig down to 13 feet down, so more than double down below the time period of Gilgamesh, they find a massive flood layer, just like it's described in ancient tablets. Okay? Now, that flood layer goes down more than 5 feet thick. We're talking about something extremely serious, not an annual river flooding event, something massive. Well, what do we know? Well, if we just pop back here really quick to the Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, we find out that there was an ancient sage or a king, sage and king, named Zayasudra or Untapishtim, who was warned by his fellow god named Enki. Keep that in mind. He's one of the Anuna or Anunnaki gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon. He warns him through a secret oath that they're not supposed to warn anyone in humanity. He warns him of a coming catastrophe that will destroy the old world. He tells him to build a certain kind of craft with bitumen to seal it, and then to basically bring his family and what they need to survive. And that story has echoed throughout indigenous and ancient cultures and Hebrew and Christian traditions and other ancient traditions throughout history. So here we are. They're excavating a place that they're trying to find a mythical city that's not supposed to be real. Then they find, underneath Gilgamesh time period, they find a massive flood layer coinciding precisely with the stories from tablets. And then what they find is the ruins of Shuruppak. Between 13 and 20 feet down, they find an ancient city with incredible pottery and other very strange type of ornaments, artifacts, one of them being a diorite 6-figured hand and some other strange things. But I just want to show these are actual artifacts that came from what is supposed to be a mythical city that's not real. Now, when archaeologists found this, they wrote a very interesting paper, which I have discussed extensively in the new book, The Missing Key, in which they extensively talk about the similarities with the ancient Mesopotamian stories, but that at the end of the day, it's just a play off of myth and legend and not actually real. And yet, here we are, well below stratum layer number 2 with Uruk and Gilgamesh, and we have the ruins of a mysterious civilization. Now, why is that so important? Well, let's really bring it home now. This isn't just me saying this. This is anyone listening to this right now was to open up their phone or their computer and just go on Google and be like, all right, how long ago did Uruk exist? Was Uruk a Sumerian city? And look what it says, Will. Isn't that amazing? That Uruk is the beginning of civilization itself, and that it's a Sumerian city, and that Gilgamesh is from that time period, except for the problem is none of the tablets at all say that Gilgamesh or Uruk was part of that earlier time period. So why are archaeologists telling us that? Because there's an entire chapter of human history that's being hidden. And they stumbled across that chapter in 1931, and nothing has happened since then. Why? Because it creates major problems in our story. And I mean major problems. And so that's where we are now, with the fact that we're finding evidence of a civilization that was the original Sumerians, and yet we're being told by academia that Uruk and Gilgamesh are the Sumerians. This is so confusing if you don't understand. So let me also then add the layer on is that all of the writings that we think are Sumerians are not. They're all Neo-Akkadian writings. In fact, Gilgamesh himself may have invented writing, which is fascinating to consider that he brought back all this ancient knowledge, and then we see the emergence of cuneiform as a writing style in ancient Neo-Akkadian cultures. So we're going to go ahead here to this part, which I absolutely love where this whole journey went, Will, because here I was exploring Ziusudra, exploring Gilgamesh, exploring the different time periods between them, without realizing that the answer all along was found in one single tablet. One tablet, Will, that almost nobody has ever heard of, called the Death of Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh is another name for Gilgamesh. So it's a Neo-Akkadian tablet, and it's the tablet that Gilgamesh himself wrote. And he wrote this tablet after he came back from meeting with Ziusudra. So let's give a little background on what this tablet is. It's called the Death of Gilgamesh. It was discovered in the 1800s in Nippur, Iraq. Now, it was pieced together by a Assyriologist, Samuel Noah Kramer. Amazing man, bless his heart. But we're going to go through the translation, and I'm going to point out where I do believe he did make a pretty large mistranslation here at the very bottom. So, Will, I'm going to go ahead and read this. We're going to break it down, because if we were to imagine where this journey begins, this journey into the ancient world to uncover who we are, this is where it starts.
To give us some a time frame, just to kind of hit a good spot for my brain, Uruk and Gilgamesh being roughly, as of now, dated at 6,500. And then I'm looking down here at the ruins of Shuruppak being much deeper down. How long are we talking, just so that we can get a good understanding of what's being missed?
Well, I don't want to say something too quickly without, building up to the evidence that causes someone to roll their eyes or something. But my evidence from studying ancient catastrophe evidence in not only Greenland but Antarctic ice cores, as well as events like the Laschamp event through lava fields of France, and studying these different climatic events that line up with ancient stories, is, I guess, what we're going to get to is proving that the original time period of Ziusudra and Shuruppak, I believe, is somewhere between 42 and 45,000 years old.
Oh my God.
And I have the evidence, I believe, to fully support and prove that.
Oh my. Okay. So we're in for some serious stuff here. Okay.
What we're talking about is a chapter of human civilization that existed far longer than our current chapter is. And that might be difficult for people to wrap their heads around. We have lost more in our ancient past than we currently even have now in this modern chapter.
Okay.
So
that they were thriving. I got you. Okay. All right. The fact that, basically what you're telling me is not only was there an ancient civilization, but they were thriving, and they were thriving for a longer period than we've been around ourselves.
Yes. And if anything, I wouldn't even say that we've really ever thrived. So we'll get into what that means in a moment. Now, again, this is where you're going to get all the answers, guys. So people listening to this, they're saying, wait a minute, you're saying Ziusudra and Gilgamesh are not from the same time period at all? No, at all. Not even the same remote time period. And this gives us that proof. If you read this and you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, you find a story. Let me tell what that story is, and then I'm going to read this. So on the left, you can see Gilgamesh in that famous mural where he's holding a full-grown lion, and it's like a house cat for him. Well, the implications was that Gilgamesh was not just a regular person, but he was what we considered in deep antiquity some kind of a demigod, and that's how they describe him. Now, in the tablets, he is a tyrant king of the city of Uruk, and he goes on a journey, an adventure, in which one of those adventures that becomes the focal point is to seek immortality. Why? Because his friend Enkidu, very interesting, right, ends up dying, his companion that he's on a journey with, and he ends up fearing his own mortality. So what does he do? He goes to the underworld. And there's that famous scene, right, that we see throughout, media now with Sharon the boatman going, ferrying people across the underworld. That came from this story. That entire story of Sharon came from ancient Sumerian, Neo-Akkadian stories of Gilgamesh, in which he travels to the underworld. Well, this is a great place for us to start in terms of connecting this to everything we're about to talk about. What is the underworld, right? How interesting is that? Well, modern religion, monotheistic religions turn it into what we call hell, basically blocking off as some kind of an evil place. And yet, here we have Gilgamesh, aka Gilgamesh, going to the underworld to seek guidance and knowledge. Doesn't sound like hell, does it? We'll get into that as we go along. Now, why is Ziusudra in the underworld? Well, Ziusudra is, remember, warned by Enki of a coming catastrophe. And so this catastrophe is what creates the flood that destroys all of this ancient world. So he, the story is, right, we're going to get into this, but he lands in the mountains of Ararat up by the Van Turkey region, and Enlil and Enki come down, and Enlil's furious because he survives the event, and no human, no man is supposed to survive. And he rewards him by preserving what is called the seed of mankind. So that story comes out of the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis. Now, what is the seed of mankind? Now, I had always thought it was bloodlines until I ended up coming across what I did. And now what I'm realizing and understanding is that what the seed is the seed of knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of everything. And that's what we're about to get into. Now, jumping forward again, here we have Gilgamesh, who is writing about his experience with meeting Ziusudra. Now, why is Ziusudra in the underworld? Ziusudra is in the underworld because he's given immortality by the Anuna gods because he preserved the seed of knowledge for mankind. Now, you can't exist in immortality in the physical realm of reality because this is a world of mortals, meaning that if he's going to be eternal, in which he was the last human ever given mortality, by the way, you have to exist in the underworld. And so that's where his abode is in the underworld. And so Gilgamesh, on this journey, gets ferried across by the boatman, which you learn about in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and he meets Ziusudra. And now, before this conversation is said, Ziusudra tells him that Shuruppak is long before him, and that it's an ancient city that the gods were once in. I always found that to be fascinating. Now, the conversation continues. He says to him, and I'm going to read this, Lord Gilgamesh, having erected stelae for future days, having founded temples of the gods, you reach Ziusudra in his abode. You brought to the land the Mies of Sumer that were forgotten forever, the commandments and the rites. Now, when I started writing the Missing Key, the second chapter talking all about this, I didn't understand fully what the Mies were. M-E-S. This entire journey of when you see where this is about to go in ancient Egypt and in Turkey and in Peru and Bolivia, it all comes down to that one phrase right there, Mies. What are they? Think about what he says, Will. You brought to the land the Mies from Sumer. So he's already telling you that the Sumerian civilizations before Gilgamesh. You see that?
Yeah.
From Sumer that were forgotten forever. We just talked about time.
Yeah.
These two civilizations are separated by more than 20,000 years. That's why they were forgotten. So what is he bringing back? Well, I love you, Samuel and Noah Kramer, but you didn't translate the end correctly. They're not commandments and rights. He didn't understand what they were because no one had ever understood what the Mies are. The Mies are the ancient blueprint or code of the knowledge of everything. Everything will. That's why when they talk about the civilizations being lowered from Eridu to Shuruppak, they talk about kingship being lowered. You remember that?
Yeah.
Kingship is very similar to the Mies. And in fact, there are 2 tablets that talk about the Mies. One, if anybody's taking notes right now, if you want to go see these and read about them, they're only mentioned in 2 places. So mysterious. One being the death of Gilgamesh, the other being what's called the tablets that are called Enki in the World Order, in which Inanna steals the Mies from Enki in Eridu and brings them to her patron city.
Wow.
So what are the Mies? Well, I was trying to understand, like, are they divine decrees? Well, they're not commandments and rights. What they are is very similar to the idea of what kingship is. Now, you find out that kingship is lowered and then moved in the Sumerian king list and others. Why would kingship be moved? What is going on here? Kingship is divine statutes of how everything works and how civilization can function in the highest level possible to reach its golden age, in a nutshell. Okay, imagine how they're carrying buckets in ancient depictions around the world, or handbags. It's the knowledge of the Mies. It is the Mies. That's what it is. It's the knowledge of how to create a civilization, how to develop mathematics, agriculture, philosophy, understanding the universe, understanding who you are, understanding our relationship and balance to everything, how the laws and rules work with our growth and our path, all of it. Imagine what would happen, Will, if you didn't have those things.
Right.
Imagine if someone doesn't have any foundations of understanding anything. Imagine how violent, imagine how disconnected they could become. So if you want to replace commandments and rights, you could say the knowledge of the divine and the knowledge of everything, something like that, right? Or the divine statutes of the universe and how reality works. That's what you could put that label on the Mies. Now, here's where it gets tragic. So Zaya Sudra gives him the knowledge of everything, the knowledge of the ancient world, the knowledge of how everything worked, the knowledge of the universe. And Gilgamesh brings it back, and he ends up becoming obsessed, Will, with his own immortality. And he misuses it, and the knowledge becomes fragmented all throughout humanity into tiny little pieces like secret societies and mystery schools and certain priesthoods that didn't become, that weren't corrupted at that point. And he loses it. And what happens, Will? For the next 6,000 years, humanity goes through the darkest time of empires and battling and war, in which we destroy ourselves and this world around us because we forget all connections to everything we once knew. And it could all be traced back to Gilgamesh and his journeys. And that is where we now begin.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Just to now, because that is a huge, and I remember asking you the question. I didn't have the terminology, the Mies, beforehand, but we did. And those of you that have seen our podcast together, I asked you about the handbags. I asked you about what you had hinted at, the knowledge. You have a greater understanding of it now. But so I'm always just kind of move our knowledge along as we're following along with you discovering and making these discoveries. We're to then assume that it's almost like saying this civilization that had knowledge of the Mies and had this knowledge, they won then at some point. You could almost say that they won the video game. If they have the understanding of reality, if they know civilization, if they won to a certain extent.
Yes, they did.
And I'm sure you're gonna get. Okay, so they rated to that golden age, and as we know, we live in the realm of impermanence. So things are constantly ebbing and flowing and going up. You reach the golden age, but then eventually you fall. And so, I mean, I'm sure you're going to get to how they fell at a certain point and why we lost this. But I find that fascinating to know that there was a civilization that could have been claimed, which we all have felt like at some degree had knowledge, had understanding. We all feel that is the case. And it seems that we have glimmers of that throughout everywhere on Earth, that somebody at some point got it right and we lost it.
Exactly. And you actually brought up a great term. You made it. You talked about it being a video game. There's actually a lot more truth than you might realize in that. Imagine the universe is a little bit more of a simulation than we understand, and it's based on teachings and lessons and growth and understanding, and that there are rules, very defined rules that go into all of it. Now, we brought up something very important, is that if Ascension and the game here, well, all games have walkthrough guides, right? Hey, you're my age. We still remember when there was walkthrough guides back in the day. Yeah. What happens if you don't have a walkthrough guide? You can kind of stumble around and understand how everything works, right? Especially if the game is really hard. And especially if the game has been misdirected into the way it was never supposed to be. Now imagine that civilization had a walkthrough guide for the entire game of Ascension and how everything worked. And then that guide was lost by Gilgamesh. And then even other guides were built that were in versions that had nothing to do with the original guide, right? Now imagine we now found that original walkthrough guide.
Wow.
And it's supposed to be lost forever, but it was encoded in a very curious way in which it was never supposed to be lost. So that's where we are now.
Okay. That's huge. That's huge, man. All right.
It's very exciting, and that's why I stay up at night and sometimes have trouble sleeping, because it's like having an entire lost civilization on your shoulders. And it's about trying to make sure that their knowledge and what they are is brought back so that it can never be lost again. So that's where we're about to go down the journey. Everything I just said is just the primer for the real journey itself. And it all leads to this point, because that's all backstory to try to understand now everything in between. If you can imagine Zayasudra and him, the journey and the story of landing up in the Ararat Mountains, and then everything else in between now, that point, all the way to Gilgamesh, is what we're about to unlock. The entire lost chapter of human history in which we're incredible, we were beautiful, and we can be beautiful again. So the tablets tell us, well, look, they land in their Mount Ararat region, which is right in that circle. And what do we have? We have a massive lake called Lake Van. Why Lake Van? Lake Van is one of the most fertile agricultural areas in the world because of its volcanic soils. And it's a highly mineralized area. And what we understand from early kingship and the original Sumerian cities of Ararat to Shuruppak is that agriculture, bar none, is the foundation of civilization, period. So knowing that, it makes sense why they would pick Lake Van, of all places in that area, to start something new. To start what, though? Well, Zayasudra's civilization was destroyed, but not the knowledge. The knowledge that they had, the Mies, and the understanding that they brought with them. Well, something very special happened in this region. Because we remember Enlil decided to destroy humanity, but because Zayasudra was preserved and protected, and he survived with the seeds of knowledge of everything, Enlil and Enki decide to create a new age with him. And that is exactly where the tablets fracture off and we lose everything. But we know that because what emerges after. So what happens after that point? Well, I had been studying ancient Armenian genealogy and looking at the genealogy of Zayasudra, and sure enough, an ancient site called Shavus Tepe near the banks of Lake Van has the lineage all the way back, far down the line, all the way back to that figure that descends from Japheth, Shem, and Ham, of an ancient lineage back to this region. So that's why I was exploring it. So I get here, and we're going to now catch up with years of field work and years of exploring this. So I get to Shavus Tepe. I end up partnering with someone who made all this possible to travel and believed in all of these discoveries and what could have been possible. And we traveled around the world. I met up with other experts and started working with famous geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, archaeologist Hans Orheim, other archaeologists like Omer Tanyurek and Jennifer Deo, and a whole host of other individuals and experts that joined this team because of what I was uncovering. So the journey may have started with very few people, but a lot of people and experts started to join because of what we were finding. So the first thing is this giant T. You get to Shavus Tepe, this place that's supposed to be a legacy of Ziusudra and his son Japheth, right? This mysterious place called Hycabird. Well, you get there and you see all these incredible designs and these mysterious things built around what look like younger structures. And archaeologists, of course, have a whole story behind who built this and when. And that is, of course, what we're going to start by challenging. So the first site that I explored were these mysterious T-pillars and also a Susi temple at Shavuz Tepe. Then Ionis, right? This unbelievable andesite temple with mysterious motifs and symbols that we find around the world. And I was shocked. From someone who studies ancient megalithic sites, I had never seen anything like these places anywhere in the world. And they stood out immediately to me. As I explored further, other sites around Lake Von, such as Kefkalesi, came up into my periphery, and we would explore these massive basalt megalithic blocks and the remnants of what were ancient temples there. But more importantly, this artifact called the Kef bas-relief came from this site, and combined with Ionis and Shavuz Tepe, created a type of symbology codex, an ancient set of knowledge encoded into these things that I did not fully understand yet. So here I am seeing some similarities in some of the designs and motifs, but I didn't know where it was going. It was strange and confusing. And yet we're told that the Urartian culture of 2,800 years ago is who built all this. But it didn't make sense. So here I am challenging all of academia with field trips and developing a documentary and writing a book and exploring these sites with archaeologists and other experts to try to prove if this lost civilization existed. And so that was my journey and my crusade. And it even includes what became the deepest known confirmed underwater ruins in the world, which is in Lake Von, right off of this site, actually. Right off of Kefkalesi, it's a town below it called the Jijivez. And beneath that are these amazing ruins that form a perfect circle if you see them from above. And in 2017, they were discovered by diver Tossin Jalen. And last year, I had a chance to dive down with the team to see them, and truly amazing experiences. And when we go over what that flower right in front of you actually means and break all these symbols down, it will be maybe a really beautiful moment for people, because what they left for us is such an enigmatic and beautiful code. It really is, and it all ties together in one. So, Will, before we move forward, this is where we traditionally have been told that all those things were built by the Iron Age Urartian culture of 800 BC. And so this is the Von Museum, and it shows you what their capabilities and what their focus was. And you know as much as anyone that the mentality and the philosophy of that culture is going to come out in what they build, what they do, right? And so does this look like a highly conscious, deep, esoteric culture to you?
No, this is war, fight, yours, I want, you give it to me, I build stuff to make sure I can take it from you.
It is. And so what you're looking at is an Iron Age culture called the Urartians, who was in the Von region and adopted all of these sites. Because we have to try to understand that the Urartian time period, 2,800 years ago, so about 3,000 years ago, this is the emergence and of the largest initial empires the world has ever seen. You're talking about the emergence of the Assyrian Empire. This is the Urartian Empire, and the Babylonian Empire, the Medes Empire. They're all emerging out of this ancient Mesopotamian region. But that we didn't begin that way. So take a look at, I want you to be familiar with the Urartian type of style. So the top image is showing their adobe mud brick that is basically just mud bricks. They stacked together and they built castles with them. And then you see their crude stonework, which is rough limestone put together. And both of these pictures are from Ionis. Now, Will, take a look at this now. So here's Ionis, same site. Now, if you look at the area that I have highlighted beneath the yellow or the orange, you can see what are collapsed mud brick, massive layer of what they would have built, which would have been huge castle walls out of mud brick. But look at what it's sitting on top of. We're talking about highly advanced megalithic stonework that's made out of basalt, nothing like the work on top. And so as this journey was unfolding of exploring evidence for a lost civilization, I was pointing all of these anomalies out and saying, look, this doesn't make sense. See, here's another example. Here's Ionis, and take a look at the massive mud brick. That's not dirt. That's mud brick on top of an andesite foundation in which they're building an entire castle on top. But why would we ever consider that to be the same culture? They didn't use any of the same stone, any of the same capabilities, any of the same symbols, and yet we're told that the same culture built it. Doesn't that seem a little strange, Will?
Of course. Of course.
So that's where I have been trying to prove. And the crusade of the entire documentary, which we've had to delay because of the discovery in Egypt and how it connects to all of this. But that is where we were trying to understand all of this. So here's a great example. I want to point this out. This is Chavus Tepe again, where the T-pillars were. Take a look at that spectacular basalt megalithic work, and then take a look at the limestone crude work around it. Now, if you look right in the center of the screen, right, if you can see my cursor, these three pillars here, here's what's so funny about it. Those are actually recreated in modern times, within the last 30 years. And instead of using basalt like they did there, beautiful basalt, even our modern culture, with all of the capabilities that we have, built that with concrete. We couldn't even build it with basalt, and we have everything available to us. Now, the other thing that you'll immediately notice is that limestone that's built around it looks nothing like the fine cut basalt, nor does it look underneath it like that. Well, it's because these temples were severely damaged and truly ancient. And by the time the Urartians even came along, nearly 3,000 years ago, they had already been abandoned for well over 10,000 years. Try to wrap your head around that. That's pretty wild.
The thing that blows my mind is that what does mainstream? Now you've even made this even worse for my brain, because if we can't, we come in, we use concrete. This happened within whatever, like you said, last 30, 50 years, whatever. Perfectly fine. Why can't we do this? Mainstream archaeology and mainstream science should be able to give me a better answer as to why megalithic structures they're so incredible. They're so huge. They weigh so much. They have such precision, right? Then we come to the Urartian culture. They're not able to do what their ancestors were able to do. We are still not able to do what our ancestors are able to do. Explain to me how then you then go, oh, well, they're hunter-gatherer. This hunter-gatherer has built some. It doesn't make sense, though, man.
No, it doesn't.
That doesn't make
sense. None of it makes any sense anymore. And I'm going to give you another angle. Is that this is called fine-grained basalt? That's in the blue. That's from the pre-Urartian culture. We still have no idea where that basalt even came from. We've never discovered the quarry. Some that have studied it claim it came from hundreds of miles away because it's a specific kind of fine-grained basalt. Not all basalt is the same. Now, this ties into your question, Will. Why didn't modern reconstruction just go do it then? Because they don't even know where the basalt came from. Not only that, but they couldn't even work with the basalt. People say we can build these things, but we don't today.
Right.
Not like this. And what you're looking at, look at those edges on that temple. I firmly believe that temple is well over 20,000 years old, and I can prove it firmly. And that conversation will at some point shift to the new conversation. And the new conversation is this. We have cross parallels that are undeniable any longer. Now, I was at this point right here when I was going to finish the book and when we were going to start editing the documentary, which is right when we were in the middle of, okay? Right when we were in the middle of doing this, we were exploring these. And so let's go through these now because, look, there's people that are going to be listening to this and say, I'm not convinced yet. Well, I've just begun. So take a look at these comparisons now around the world, and you'll see this pattern begin, and then we're going to get into and explain it all. First thing is top left of the screen, That's that T-pillared Chavus Tepe. Notice the 3 levels, this combination of 3 everywhere we're going to get into. Bottom of the screen, that's from Puma Punku in Bolivia, in South America. Now, as we'll get it going, you'll see that it's not only the T doorway, but it then combines the step pyramid, inverted step pyramid on the top right from the Kef bas relief. The inverted step pyramid is right here. So you got to remember, when you're looking at ancient depictions, everything has meaning and everything has purpose, including the different levels and the negative space, not just what they make in front, but you have to be able to train your eyes. And so imagine they took this inverted pyramid, combine it into the doorway T, and boom, you have 2 symbols combined together. Then take a look at the middle image from Kef Kalesi, these giant blocks of andesite and basalt, eerily similar, right, to Bolivia. Now go up to the top, Kef Kalesi, these 3 doorways, 3 step pyramids, that 3-level step pyramid. Then across the world in Ollantaytambo, at what's called the Spring of the Nusta, you have the very same thing. Something is going on here, Will. Something that's not just a random coincidence. Okay? Take a look at the distances between Von Turkey and Peru and Bolivia. You're talking about over 7,000 miles away. So let's jump right in. At Ollantaytambo, which we filmed at, here you have these weird megaliths, right? You get the 3-level step pyramid, in which you have a stone here that was broken on the left side, which you have 3 levels in a doorway. Definitely not a coincidence. And then you go right next to it, which I just mentioned, and the Spring of the Nusta, you get the same 3 levels and step pyramid. So 3 within and then 3 without, right? Remember, as above, so below, as within, so without. We'll get into what all that means as we get along here.
Yeah.
Now, same thing. Take that step pyramid, take the inverted one, take the non-inverted one, and combine it together to the most important ancient symbol in South America still today that the Inca carried down, which is the Chicana. So you're talking about origins of all of these ancient symbols that have profound meanings, and we'll get into what they mean soon. So then, not only the step pyramid, but then let's get into the T. So then you see this T repeating over and over again. It's not only on the Kef bas relief, but it's also as these megalithic, monolithic structures themselves. Now, this is where I really want everyone in the audience to remember right now. This symbol right here, this step pyramid, with the inverted and the doors, these symbols, you can actually kind of call them one. It's the 3 doorways, 3 step pyramids. And the T is the signature of this lost civilization. That's what I had to realize and understand, is it's a signature. But it's not just a signature. It's an entire set of teachings. But it was the most important symbols for their entire culture was those. And we'll get in to showing them around the world in more ways. So again, I want to start by on the bottom right. You have on the right side is Dr. Robert Schoch. He is arguably the most famous geologist in the world. And in the 90s, he was working with John Anthony West, and he was the one who was pioneering and basically started the entire conversation that the water erosion of the Sphinx enclosure was older than the dynastic Egyptians. So it's such an honor to have him part of the project to explore all these things with us. He is deep respect to him always as a researcher. And on the left side, next to me, is Hans Orheim. He is an archaeologist from Sweden. He has extensively worked in South America and Egypt. And we're in the Von Museum at one of those T-pillars from Chavus Tepe that was brought to the Von Museum, in which there was only one brought, and the rest of them are still sitting there in situ. Now, on the left side is the backside of the sun gate at Tiwanaku. Notice you have the T and the inverted step pyramid combined together, but also the 3 doors, Will. Starts to get a little spooky, doesn't it?
Yeah. This symbol, it's funny because when you showed this to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I may have been at Ionis or Kef Kalesi, where there's another doorway-like structure like this, not quite as imposing, but kind of off to its own. There's a picture that I've seen of you standing next to that doorway.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. And it's always been one of my. I love this structure. I don't think I've not had the chance to see one in person. Right. And then when you put this, obviously the Chicana, as you're saying, obviously by connecting the inverted and the three doorways together. Can we get into, and I know you're probably going to get into this further, what the symbol represents in and of itself? Because I know maybe I'm getting ahead of myself and wanting to discuss the.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because that part right there, I can't.
Thing. Yeah, we'll get into the whole symbology codex and understanding it all. I just want people to first see the similarities around the world with it, and then we'll get into defining. Because at this point, I didn't even know what it meant either.
Right. Yeah, you're just noticing the fact that it's obviously popping up in every place where it shouldn't.
Yeah, and I had ideas of what it might mean, and I had ideas of what the T meant, but it wasn't until Egypt that all of these things became understood.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So then, and that's a perfect segue as we can move to Egypt. So this is exactly where I was, Will. It's actually it's great that you actually brought that up. So let's backpedal to what you just said. I didn't know what all those symbols fully meant. I had ideas. I had curiosities. I knew they were important, but I didn't know what they meant. And so here we are. We're in November, this past November, and we're in the middle of editing the documentary. And I'm trying to finish the book. I'm excited because I'm like, look, we're going to prove a cross-continental set of symbols that can't be denied around the world, right? Yippee. We're going to do this, Will. We're going to prove a lost civilization, and then this happened. And this is an incredible story in itself. And this whole series of events that then transpired was literally like a cascade rabbit hole. That the 3 months after this occurred was the most exciting 3 months of my life. And so I was exactly where you just were a second ago, is saying, what are they? I don't know how to define them. I just know they're important everywhere in the world. Right? So let me lay the stage here. I live in a snowy cabin on a lake, a remote place in the northern Great Lakes. And it's snowing outside. I'm standing there. And this picture is on my wall. So you look at the top left of the picture, that's me going to get it and going to a Photoshop to get it digitally enhanced because of what occurred. Now, a little backstory is that photograph. Now, Will, I mean, you and I go way back. You can see it behind me everywhere I've gone. We've done shows since I lived in Colorado. Mm-hmm. I bought that picture 8 years ago at a yard sale for like $3 or $4. Yeah. It was in a plastic frame. It was like a generic picture. I was like, cool. Something spoke to me though to get it. So I buy this, simple-ish picture, and it's hanging behind me everywhere I go. So if anybody listening to this doesn't think that story is true, go back to videos all the way back and you'll see it right behind me. And I've looked at it hundreds of times, and it sits above my altar. Instead of a TV, I have an altar. It sits there, and so now going back to where I just was. It's snowing outside, and I had this really, really weird moment. Very weird. Very direct kind of thought pop in. Very external that says, look at the picture. And look, I live in a lot of interesting metaphysical worlds. So at first I was thinking to myself, I've looked at that picture hundreds of times. I think I've seen it. And I actually sat back down on the couch because my couch sits and looks at the altar. And the voice came in again. Same thing. Same direct thought, says, look at the picture. So I got up, of course, and I'm looking at it with that like skeptical at first kind of energy, right? Okay, come on, really? Yeah. And I'm looking at it, and it was almost, I swear, it was almost like this depiction formed in front of me that somehow I couldn't see or hadn't seen, or whatever you want to call it. Very strange. And it was like, it was so obvious once I saw it, but before I didn't even notice it. And there I said, you got to be kidding me. There in front of me was what looked like a broken, half broken inverted 3-level step pyramid sitting right beneath the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau. So first thing I say, Will, is no way. There's no way. In the most studied of ancient locations on the earth that gets more tourists than every other ancient site in the world pretty much combined, it's the last place you're ever going to find it, right? No way. It's the last place you're ever going to find something that's like a Rosetta Stone or something that unlocks things. So first thing I do, I did a search online, reverse image search, use AI to try to find it. Can't find a single other image anywhere, of even that area that faces it. Find out through a little research, it's in one of the only off-limits areas in all of the Giza Plateau, in a place called the Sphinx Temple that you can't go to unless you get special permissions. It's literally gated off. And so tourists are like walking by it all the time. They're taking pictures up of the Sphinx, and little did they know that mere feet from them, because if you look at where that arrow is, the other side of that is where you walk by the pause. So for everybody listening to this podcast right now who has walked by the Sphinx and had your back to this, you literally had your back to one of the most important discoveries in what became unlocking this entire code around the world.
That's me. I've been there.
And there you go. And Will was like, oh my God, I was one of the ones who did it. Would walk right by it. So first thing, I'm intrigued. I'm like, this is in the Sphinx Temple. You don't get access to it, so very few people go there. Well, who has access to the Sphinx Temple? Well, Dr. Robert Schoch famously studied the Sphinx Temple with Egyptologist Mohammed Ibrahim. So I called both of them on the phone. Like, have you guys seen this? They both had missed it too. Nobody had noticed it. It's possible no one's ever noticed it. And I mean, look, I had the picture for 8 years sitting next to my... dumbly sitting next to me. I didn't notice it either. So there's a psychology term for that, Will, called the invisible gorilla. And the invisible gorilla is a term in which if you do not expect to find something or see something like a giant gorilla in a room, you will not see it. And it's really interesting. There's a whole psychology behind the brain and what it is focused on and what it's trained to see versus what it's looking for.
Yes.
So that was really interesting to me, how it was like I couldn't see it, but it was there the whole time. So I then go, okay, this is weird. So Dr. Robert Schoch and Mohammed hadn't noticed it and didn't have any pictures of it really, or not really much. And so I'm thinking to myself, is this really one of the only photographs of this in the world that shows this? First of all, that is, talk about bizarre.
Yeah.
That would be, and look, I mean, obviously, since I talked about this, some people have, someone, like for instance, someone found Jonathan E. West footage where he like briefly walks by it or something. But in terms of an actual photograph, nobody has actually come forth and shown me another one of these. And so I'm not saying it doesn't exist anywhere in the world, but I can't find it. But more importantly, the fact that it is the frame picture that I had bought that led to everything. And I haven't even told you, I haven't even explained what this led to. Yeah. Right? But that in itself is bizarre in its own way, right? So I started doing research on it. I'm like, okay, well, you can clearly see that the block right below here, I'll show you my cursor so we can run through this. You can clearly see a perfect seam cut where they laid these down, and then if you want to try to imagine, this design would have been mirrored on this side like this, on the other side. Yeah. And it's no coincidence it sits below the Sphinx. It's the Sphinx is a guardian, and we'll get into what that was originally looked like and why the inverted pyramid is so fitting, because it is a symbol that represents the underworld. And we will get into we'll get into that in a moment here. So this is where it gets wild. This is where things cascaded and got just incredible, to say the least. I look up the Sphinx temple layout because I'm just trying to study every angle to try to understand it. I almost had a mini heart attack, Will, because so you had the step pyramid design, which the inverted step pyramid, which would be this right here.
Yep.
The design itself, the entire inverted and non-inverted symbol that I had been essentially tracing all around the world, was designed into the entire temple layout. And it's not just the step pyramid, but the actual T's as the columns themselves. Look,
Yep.
6 on each end. And I was like, oh my God. And then I saw the giant T in the Valley Temple next to it. So I had 2 mini heart attacks. Thankfully, I survived. This immediately blew my mind. And I knew that it was something very significant that potentially nobody has ever seen before, which is wild to imagine that obviously archaeologists have studied these site layout plans, but didn't understand that these symbols were anything significant. And so first thing I do is I contact Dr. Robert Schoch and Mohammed, and they were pretty amazed. And because of this, Mohammed Ibrahim has joined the team as part of this whole discovery. So I contact Dr. Robert Schoch, and I love this part of the story because, look, he's an excellent researcher, right? If you're going to get a theory by him, your theory is sound. Let's just put it that way. The guy obviously dots his I's and crosses his T's with everything. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I want to give this to Robert and see what he thinks, because he studied the Sphinx temple and the Sphinx enclosure and the Sphinx arguably more than anybody else that's alive. So he's like the expert bar none. So I emailed Robert, sent him all my findings, and I get an email back. And instead of pushback, Robert says, hey, Matt, take a look at the mortuary temple for Khafre's pyramid. And I said, no way. And I pull up the mortuary temple for Khafre's pyramid on the right. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's not a real mortuary. I mean, it represents death. And we know that death has nothing to do with the pyramids. Mm-hmm. They weren't tombs. And so it's not really a mortuary temple, but it's an entryway temple. So if anybody wants to understand what a mortuary temple is, it's an entryway temple into the Great Pyramids. So here we have not only the T's right here, see, repeating over and over again, but the step pyramid designed into the entryway itself. So I was like, oh my God, the Great Pyramids are connected. So then I go to immediately, of course, what I do is go to Khufu, or the Great Pyramid, because has nothing to do with Khufu. And the same design is in the Great Pyramid. And then the same design is in Menkaur's pyramid. All 3 of the Great Pyramids are now connected. So I'm sitting here in awe, Will, like, oh my God, what did I just find with Robert? Like, what did we just uncover here, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're now linking a cross-continental set of symbols, 3 continents, and instead of the symbols only being in stones, we now have entire temple layouts with those symbols. So when I ended up having a meeting with Dr. Robert Schoch about this, he said this wonderful quote, and I'm going to slightly paraphrase it, but basically what he said, and I love this. He said, and he's seen more of this than anyone in the world. He's been everywhere in the world to see these symbols. He's been to Cambodia. He's been to Turkey at least twice with me. He's been to Peru, Bolivia. We've been boots on the ground exploring these everywhere in the world, okay? You know, this is what he says. He said, and I think this represents modern academia right now as a statement. He said, it's one thing to argue stones in symbols that you could say is a coincidence, but it's another thing to have those entire symbols as the temple layouts themselves. That's it.
Absolutely.
How do you argue that anymore, Will?
You can't, though. That was my problem when you originally put it to me, because that was what I wanted to do, is to find where I'm going to push back. But now I'm working too hard to take away these T's and the layout from everything else. It doesn't make sense. It makes more sense that they're connected than that they're not. And especially now with the layout. And so
that's what does it. That's what sinks it, I think. That's really what gives us that home run.
But what does that mean though? If you just give me one small,
we're gonna get into that. Don't worry, there's a lot more.
Okay.
No, I know. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, what does that mean?" No,
I don't. It's breaking my brain. What is going on here?
Where this is about to go. Obviously, if anyone's not familiar with my work, they probably never would have imagined where this is about to go. This is actually really. I know I keep saying this, but it's really just the beginning of the journey. And for me, I'm sitting here now. I'm saying, I want to give a snapshot of where I was. So I'm sitting here seeing these symbols everywhere in the world, and I'm saying, okay, now what? What do they mean? Why are they all encoded into everything? Why are they encoded into entire temple layouts? Well, I understood above and below, as above, so below. I'm a deep initiate student of mysticism and Hermeticism. I'm not going to say that I was completely blind to the idea that there were similarities on the Kef bas-relief that looked like Hermeticism. I definitely saw that. And I definitely saw aspects of mirroring an idea of something bigger and smaller as different temples. Like I got that, but that didn't make sense though. But what are they mirroring? What are they mimicking? Why what are they doing all this for? Well, let's build to that. I need you to hold with me, Will, okay? Stay with me for a few minutes and we'll get into what these mean because I want to show more examples.
Okay.
As this unfolded, more of these temple layout discoveries unfolded and happened too. And I'm going to show you them all first so that everyone listening to this can go, okay, that's undeniable. Because I don't want anyone to come away from this and be like, he didn't spend enough time going through these symbols. I don't get what they mean, or that they don't look similar enough, or whatever it is. Right. So we're really going to make sure we saturate this. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
The next one, and I just found this literally like 2 days ago. So some of this presentation has just been updated. And I had to, just because how incredible it is. So now we're leaving the Giza Plateau. Now we're going hundreds of miles south. We're going all the way down to the Temple of Horus in Edfu, right? To a whole completely different place. And what happens when you pull up a temple layout designs, Will? On the left side is the Temple of Horus site layout. On the right are those symbols from the Sphinx and the Valley Temple. Just to show you how they cross over. This is where your mind goes, like explodes. Because every entryway is the T's with fractal geometry of being bigger and then getting smaller. Keep that in mind. Super important to understand all this. So they make everything bigger. Look, giant T, slightly smaller T, smaller, smaller. Right, and then take a look at this. This is where it gets really cool. They take the T and they combine with the inverted pyramid, just like in Puma Punku. And they have them all combined together. So if you were to try to take your brain, try to wrap your head around this, start your brain here, right here, go up. There's the T. Then go the opposite way, reverse it. Start here and build up. Then you get the pyramid, but with the T combined. So they're taking these designs and combining them together in one place. Now go down here, look. There's your step pyramid combined into what's literally looks like a Susi temple, which is like Ionis in Vaughn. And we'll get into talking about that as we go along. But look at this design and wait till I show you this how that relates. They're mimicking everything. Everything is being mimicked here. And so if you want to try to understand, you have the inverted and non-inverted pyramid and the T repeating over and over again in the temple site layout. How cool is that, Will?
That's insane. I didn't expect it to be this identical, to be honest, especially from the outside, just what it looks like.
It's undeniable. Like now we're going to add more. We're not even done yet. If we're not even done, we're going to keep adding. So then let's jump to Tiwanaku. Dr. Robert Schock and Hans Orheim discovered this site layout. So I want to give big congratulations to both of them because they found the next site layout. So I say this, right? We're going to define what I mean by that. These are the two axes you need. If you're going to get confirmation, we're going to call it confirmation on discoveries. To prove this, you need two things. One, you need those exact symbols in the stones. Okay? That's one. The two, you need the same symbols carved into the temple layout. Once you do that, you get what I call a home run. That's it. Game over. So here you have at Tiwanaku, remember the same stone right there that I'm standing next to with Robert Schoch. See the design?
Yeah.
Now, the entire Akapana pyramid temple layout, which is like the entire platform of Tiwanaku, it's huge, is that symbol designed as a fractal geometry of the whole site. So the temple layout is the design yet again, just like in Egypt. Does that make sense, Will?
Yeah, 100%.
And so they're combining the T with the inverted pyramid just like they did here in the Temple of Horus, just like they did there. So that's that, oh my God moment again. Now we have temple site layouts confirming not only in Egypt, but also in Tiwanaku. But we're not done yet. Will, let's head to ancient Persia. This was literally yesterday that I announced this. Yesterday.
Okay.
So this is right cutting edge, and this was what I mentioned at the very beginning of the show that Samia discovered, and then it led to me then finding all kinds of other comparisons with the T doors and T pillars and everything and the step pyramids. So let's go to Persepolis right now. Same thing. Great Xerxes Palace. Within one area of Persepolis is an older foundation of the temple. And there, first of all, not only does this look like a Susi temples, but there you have the T with the step pyramid combined exactly like Egypt and exactly like Bolivia. Same thing. Same thing is that the entryways are the T and the step pyramid combined. Will, what do you think, my friend?
Oh, no, yeah, no. I mean, I can, and I know once again you're going to tell me put my brakes on because I'm so curious about what this all means. But now we've talked about different cultures across different time periods. I have to say though too now, correct?
Well, no, not necessarily. So imagine the Achaemenid Empire that built a lot of these palaces and temples in Persepolis. That's why I said this temple design is only in one part of that complex because it's likely an older part of the temple that the Achaemenid Empire with Xerxes and Darius, they built around it because remember, it's the same thing as the Urartians. Same thing as the dynastic Egyptians. There's nothing different. They find an ancient site that's extremely important. Then they build everything around it and make it the heart of their culture.
Right. Then they don't have enough of the knowledge to make it exactly like the people from before, but they understand its importance. They maybe have a few other myths that make them go, okay, this was important. We got to stay here. And this is why the palace is here. This is why the pyramids are here, et cetera, so on.
Which is why they don't repeat the same motifs really at all. Think about it for a minute. The dynastic Egyptians don't repeat really the step pyramid, the T. Why?
Yeah.
In Cambodia, the Khmer Empire doesn't repeat any of the symbols we found there. Why? The ancient, the Urartians, they change things around, but they don't really repeat the original ones because they didn't really understand them.
Okay.
So, Will,
that's what
you're
asking. Thinking.
You're asking this question of what they mean. I think even they only partially understood what they meant.
Yeah. So they understood its importance, but not exactly what it was for and why it was there. They just knew this is something. And maybe even they had little inklings more than we did because they were closer to the time period of, proper power. Like we're so detached now that we look at Stonehenge and we're like, oh, that's cool. We don't have the slightest idea for what it was because we're so detached, but they may even understood that we're so detached now that we can't get that at all. So I totally get it. Okay.
And they didn't seem to know much about it, I would say, because of their philosophy and their mindsets didn't reflect that. And like, for instance, even being a war culture, that's like, we'll get into it, but basically there's understandings of violations you can't do as part of this whole global lost civilization. There's things they never would have done. So we'll get into what those are. Well, now, this pattern, this is now undeniable. Would you agree? Around the world.
100%. 100%. Yes.
So the next steps are, let's break down what it means and what all of this connects to, because I want to really lay this out so we can make sure that it never gets lost again. Now, this is the final step. I think everyone's going to love this. Let's bring it all the way home to Ionis. That design on the left side is what the Susi temples look like. The Susi temples are like their main temples, and they are what Ionis is. Now, take a look at the same designs are then essentially repeated everywhere else in the world from a proto-origin point, guys. That's this. Notice, same thing, top right, Kef bas-relief, Van region. T-pillar in the bottom right, Chavus Tepe, Van. Ionis in the left, Van. All of these symbols, all of these teachings, everything was lowered here. Zaya Sudra. That entire story, that's why all of this knowledge came out of nowhere. Literally a golden age began in Van. Began. When? We're going to get into the dating. But I believe it was, I can bring in precise dating, but somewhere right around 41,500 years ago. And we can call it 40, we can call it 40 years ago, just 40,000 just to keep a nice consistent number.
Sure.
So explain where I came to those numbers. Now, take a look at the left on the Susi temple, because see that design? See the entrances?
Yeah.
Look, guys, we're talking about repeats of Susi temples too. Okay? Look, ignore right now. Pretend that these breaks weren't here. See the outer design? Look. See how it sticks out on the corners and makes that design? Yeah. I believe these are all remnants of Susi-like temples, like this. Same, look, in entryway, look, 3-level step pyramid, then the T built in. There's your core concept repeated every single place around the world. Now that we've established that, what are all of these? What is all this? What is going on, Will? So I'm sitting there scratching my head, and I am digging into ancient architectural, hermetic, geometric designs. And I found the one word that unlocked everything, Will. And I say that because it truly is one word. Imagine all the secrets of a lost civilization, everything from history. We have all this, but what does it mean? What do the 3 doors mean? What do the 3 pyramids mean? What does the upright pyramid versus the inverted pyramid? What do the T's mean? All of it, right, Will? It's one thing. It's one thing if you identify all of those things, but then what do they mean? That is where the unfolding of all of this took place, because of Egypt. Now, as I'm digging into ancient Egyptian understandings and ancient Hermetic understandings, the word that broke this whole thing open is a word that has barely been used at all. I'm not going to say it hasn't been used at all, but barely been used in the last few years, to the point where the word itself was about to go extinct. The word was about to be turned into oblivion. Now, the word is cosmogram. Everybody remember that. It's a very important moment to give that back to humanity, because cosmogram is what every single one of these are. They're all cosmograms. Once I figured that out, it was like a complete cascade. Complete cascade. Now, what is a cosmogram? A cosmogram is a geometric design that represents the 3 aspects of the structure of the universe. Guys, we're not talking about something that's just Earth or just humanity. These civilizations are encoding the structure of the universe into their temples. The universe, everyone. Try to understand and imagine as I'm going through these. Wrap your brain around. They're encoding the structure of the universe. Now that we've had that established, what does that really mean? Well, once that unfolded, that's what these were, I then had to figure out what all the doors were. And I then had to figure out what all the other things were. Now, in my opinion, the best thing that the Egyptians did is that They are the ones, the dynastic Egyptians are the ones who carried the legacy of this knowledge down potentially more than anyone else, any other ancient culture in history. They maintained them, okay? Which means that in order to understand all of this, I was able to do it through the lens of the Egyptians. But before we get into all of that, what it means, what the doors mean, the whole thing, we have to get dating down. Because I know I can't move forward unless people understand how old and everything. But look at this picture as we're about to talk about dating. Will, what you're seeing in front of you is the Sphinx temple. That's where this whole thing, discovery, began. See how it's all fenced in? That's the Sphinx temple. That cipher stone with that inverted pyramid was inside there. That's where it came from. So now we're going to do dating, and then we're going to get into all the meat of all this, the meat of what everything means and what the ramifications are for history. Now, the dating is really beautiful here because we have a number of different things we can use for dating. One, if we go back to this, one of the most important things about the Temple of Horus is that it encodes an entire set of teachings into its walls that is known as Zep-Tepi. And Zep-Tepi is the origins of everything in Egypt, the beginning of Egypt, not the dynastic Egyptians, but the beginning of everything else. And it discusses and talks about it. But when is that beginning? Well, we're going to go back to this. So here we're going to talk about dating very briefly before we move on, because look, some people listening to this are going to say, I'm still not convinced. I want to see dating. I want to understand this. And so let's do a little dating, and then we're going to get into the meat of what everything means and how it all unfolded for the meanings behind the symbols. So in the image I'm showing in front of you, very timely, because again, you have the setting sun with what is also the Sphinx temple, and that shows you the enclosure, how it's closed off. You can't even get into it. Those gates are the Sphinx temple. So that's where that discovery was. That's where that stone is inside there. So let's get into dating. Now, the dating mechanisms we're using here are two primary dating mechanisms. One is we are dating the connections with the Sphinx and Leo. So we're going to get into that whole thing. And then the second piece of dating is what's called the Laschamp or Adam's event. Now, the Sphinx is where we're going to begin. Now, based on our understanding of archetypal guardians, and so let me explain what archetypal guardians are. Right here at the top of this screen, I want to show this is from Vaughn. Now, at the top of the screen, you see the eagle guardians. Well, let me go back to this. This shows it entirely. I want to explain this. The ancient civilization that built all this believed that all three realms of reality had to have guardians, and that the guardian of Earth between the realms of the underworld and above was the lion. It was their archetypal guardian. It represented the celestial connection between Leo and the archetypal guardian of a lion that's fierce, that defends. And they believed that that was how they would depict these specific guardians in every realm of reality. And so the upper celestial realms you have the eagle guardian above, and then you can see the lion down below. That's what this whole depiction is showing you. It's actually showing you different realms of reality with different guardians. Now, knowing that, we can now bring in this understanding that the lion was a very significant guardian to this culture, very significant, to the point where we understand when you look at this and its connection, notice automatically that the Sphinx head is disproportionate to the body. That's because it used to be a lion, and the dynastic Egyptians recarved it as a pharaoh. Now, if you look and you try to understand from this lens, these cosmogram designs that are basically showing you, these cosmogram designs that are showing you the design of the universe woven into it, you have this giant archetypal guardian that is here guarding this realm of below and above. And that is anyone who studies ancient Egyptian understanding and this important guardian symbol will understand what that means. So let's go back now to where we were. Now, when we look at the Sphinx and we understand its role as a guardian, and we also understand its role as a celestial guardian, we look and you say, okay, so the Sphinx was based on Leo, and because the ancients believed that you want to create a synergy as above and below, and that Leo was a very important constellation that obviously represented the lion as a guardian. And so that was their primary guardian symbol for a lot of this ancient lost civilization around the world. So knowing that, and knowing that the dynastic Egyptians recarved the Sphinx to be a pharaoh, we have to understand that ancient relationship with the lion. Now, let's get into how they aligned things in ancient times. They were obsessed with this idea of the as above, so below, as within, so without, based on Hermeticism. And the understanding was that what's happening in the celestial above is also being mimicked and happening here, and that there is no separation between them. And so you'll see that's a theme as we're going forward. So they align very specific things like pyramids and guardians like the Sphinx with these constellations that during different ages. And to try to understand, to explain what ages are, you have what is called the Great Year, which is based on the precession of the equinox of the Earth. The reason for that is that the Earth is wobbling on its axis, and it tilts and it faces different constellations every 2,100 years. That's what zodiacs are. And they're tracking them based on ages. And it really does matter because every age, as we're moving from Pisces into Aquarius, every age comes along with its entire own set of consciousness and civilization reaching a certain levels. And it's a reflection of above and below.
Yeah.
That's why I would remind everybody listening to this is that as dark as Pisces was, only means that the balance of the opposite is what's going to be true for Aquarius. Just remember that. Mm-hmm. So the Great Sphinx, being a lion, is facing Leo, but when? Well, John Anthony West, the great hero who's no longer with us, along with Dr. Robert Schoch, they always had this debate over and over again because they knew that Leo and the lion were only aligned during two times in somewhat modern history until we go really far back. And number one, its alignment can only be either 12,000 or 38,000 years ago based on precession, which means we're blowing the dynastic Egyptians out of the water by over double.
Yeah.
By over double, even on the minimum date. Okay? The minimum date. Now, John Anthony West believed that ancient Egypt and Zep-Tepi, right? We had that connection with the Temple of Horus with what they call Zep-Tepi, written into the walls there of the very beginning of everything. John Anthony West believed that was 38,000 years ago. And I believe he was 100% correct. Because 12,000 years ago during the Older and Younger Dryas catastrophes, as we left the Pleistocene into the time period of the Holocene, was absolute disaster on the Earth. And I firmly believe, and that we can prove, that that is the time period in which these civilizations were all destroyed. Not when they were created, when they were destroyed. And that was the very end of the lost civilizations in history, and that everything that came out of that was the remnants of them. Now, I have a depiction here that shows mammoths because this is before the last ice age ended. And when we discount 12,000 years ago, which I think we can, considering it was absolute chaos on the Earth, we then go to the previous precessional age, which brings us right to 38,000 years ago. Why is that so important? Well, I want to get into talk about what I briefly mentioned before, which is called the Laschamp or Adams event. Now, what that event is it's the last time in history that scientists have been able to prove, based on a combination of ice cores, tree rings, and lava fields called the Laschamp lava fields of France. That's why it's called the Laschamp event. So what happened? They're studying these lava fields, and they find all of these bubbles that contain all of the environment at the time of that. And they're able to study the climate based on these air bubbles in these lava fields. And at the same time, scientists in New Zealand find these giant kuri trees that had basically fallen into these mud pits and were preserved when they died from a very specific event that was catastrophic across the Earth. Now, that event they've confirmed is the last geomagnetic excursion on the Earth. That's the last time we had that. Well, consider the Sayasudra Sumerian flood, the deluge. The Earth, it's been confirmed by scientists that geomagnetic excursion, that the Earth's North Pole wobbled off kilter by a significant amount and remained there for over 400 years. And that the entire geomagnetic excursion event of our poles, the magnetic sphere, was somewhere around 700 years. So why do I say that? Imagine the Earth tilting on its axis. You're going to get a bulge effect with the water because of how magnetism and gravity and how everything works. Now imagine descriptions of a deluge inundating entire parts of the Earth. That's how you can get your deluge. That's how you can destroy the old ancient world. And when was that event? 41,500 years ago. And when was the alignment of Egypt? Giza? 38,000 years ago, which means that it would have given this civilization that began at Ionis over 2,000 years to reach Egypt. It all lines up. It all lines up with ice cores and with these events of Zep Tepi and these alignments to constellations. Will, what do you think about that?
Insane, because previously with all of the new discoveries and things, obviously Göbekli Tepe was blowing things out of the water with the 10,000 roughly around this 12,000 period. I know, but to have something that's going to push it way back all the way there is wild.
And it means that this civilization, Will, you ready for this? This civilization mastered everything and existed for over 20,000 years. Try to wrap your head around that. Modern human culture. We were in a horse and buggy 600 years ago, 500 or 600 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. They mastered and lived in a harmony for over 20,000 years. So that's the legacy they left. And that's the legacy that I'm about to go into.
Oh, yeah. So fantastically more. Okay. So you're going to go into what exactly? You're going to go into what it is that you believe that they have now. Oh, okay. So I see. Now, based off this,
break this whole thing down. I want to make sure we don't miss any details. So first thing is, this is the timeline that is accepted and taught for the last several hundred years.
All right.
Okay, by modern academia. So I really want everyone to pay attention to this because we're about to blow this whole thing open. So take a look at 10,000 BC on the left. We're going to start here.
Mm-hmm. Good.
We're told that at which was, if you had BC means you had to add 2,000 years. So 12,000 years ago, this is us. Hunter-gatherer Neolithic cultures, okay? What we're talking about now is pushing this back to 40,000 years of civilization, not hunter-gatherers, not Stone Age, the emergence of civilization itself, okay? Meaning that this group of hunter-gatherers, this kind of people, this is not how we began in the classical sense of how we think. It means that something else emerged out of this, in which we were then thrown back into this. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So we have an entire chapter in which Neolithic hunter-gatherer cultures had to reemerge after 12,000 years ago. Reemerge. As well as the Neo-Akkadian Empire reemerging in Mesopotamia. That's the key here, reemerging. Okay? Meaning that this entire chapter beyond this does not exist according to them. So going down here, the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, somewhere about 5,000 years ago, right?
Right.
How about 38,000 years ago? And that Khufu right here actually just built dynastic Egypt, recarved the pharaoh, and claimed that as being a tomb. So even though there's never been a pharaoh ever found in any of the Great Pyramids, and we know they're all buried in the Valley of the Temple, the Valley of the Kings, over 450 miles south. So now, this is a very critical moment right here. Very critical moment that we have to sit at for a second. Remember this lens right here, everyone. Okay. Rise of the Neo-Akkadian, get rid of the word Sumerian here, write in Neo-Akkadian and Assyrian cultures, okay? Egypt, all of this. Imagine empires emerge here. Assyrian Empire, Akkadian Empire, Babylonian Empire, Medes Empire, Ottoman empires, guys, Egyptian empires, they were an empire, okay? All of these, ancient Persian empires, all of them are in here. We then define our entire existence and origin as that. Does that make sense, Will?
100%. Yeah. That's what we've
so
been taught.
we then say, look, guys, here we are now. We're fighting each other in wars around the world still. We are destroying our Earth. Oh, but we started here. That's what we are. That's what defines us. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We're that other dog that instead of the first we're like two dogs, right? Humanity represent two puppies. That's what we are. The first puppy went to a beautiful home and was raised by a beautiful family with morals and became a beautiful dog, an amazing dog. Whereas the other dog was raised by a violent family that taught it war, taught it violence, and it became a vicious dog. Humanity became that second dog, not the first. We were never supposed to be that. We were groomed into violence, groomed into these empires right here, guys. This is the Assyrian Empire. This is the Persian Empire, Achaemenid Empire. Okay? This is the Medes Empire. We have defined our entire origin on this falsely. Everything since then is cascaded because of this. What I'm about to show and prove is that we never began there. Never. And that none of that even existed. And what we're now about to do is go through and redefine the entire human experience. Redefine reality itself. So, that is the ultimate question we begin at Chavus Tepe, is who were we? Now, this ancient code around the world, we just showed it everywhere, right? Now let's break it all down. Here you're in Napa and Glacia, 3 doors. Step pyramid as an axis mundi. What is an axis mundi? It means you have a vertical and horizontal meeting to create above and below as that meeting point. Same design across the world in these ancient mysterious gateways that people around the world have thought this has got to be some kind of a gateway. Well, it is. Not only is this encoded as ancient knowledge, but there's also technology, and we'll get to what that technology is. So getting into breaking all this down, we're going to get through what all of these mean. Now, how did I figure this out? Mostly because of ancient Egypt. Again, I said the best thing they ever did is the dynastic Egyptians carried down the old traditions. Thank God they did, because we probably wouldn't have figured this out if it wasn't for them. The first thing of the 3 doors. The 3 doors. What do they mean? Well, ancient Egypt understood that reality was made up of only 3 pieces. They had all of it was mapped out. If anyone wants to read the Book of the Dead and others in ancient Egypt, you'll understand that Egypt had mapped out reality. They had mapped out the underworld, and they understood how reality and realms of reality worked. So the first place I went is to understand it through them, because they maintained it. Well, they understood that reality was made up of 3 pieces. The middle door, you ready for this? The middle door always represents physical reality manifested that we see all around us, physical reality. The left and right door are 2 metaphysical realms of reality that support and exist on each side. Now, the left door, what is it? Well, Egypt understood that west or left represent as a fractal microcosm, macrocosm level, meaning smaller and bigger. As above, so below. West always represented death. And that east, with the rising of the sun, was always resurrection, meaning that imagine they saw the sun and moon as a cycle of death and rebirth. That's how they saw the cosmos. So as the sun sets in the west, you have the death, right? And then as it sets in the east, you have the reemergence and the rebirth. The 3 doors represent the very same thing. That's how I was able to figure them out. So the left door represents the underworld or duat. And then the right door represents the celestial or higher realms. And I think people can probably understand that through also the lens of what's right in front of us. See these two figures? One is on the left, one is on the right. Now, you can also equate these to negative and positive, dark and light. There is no difference. There is no separation, meaning that this right here is the archetype of Enki, who is a positive god of knowledge preservation. He became the same archetype of Thoth and Hermes. There is no difference. That is the same teacher over and over and over again. He represents the positive or right side. On the left is his counterpoint, or his negative counterpoint, meaning if you have balance and you may have to maintain balance of all, you must have dark and light. Light can't exist without dark, and dark cannot exist without light. We'll get into all those teachings in a minute. I'm just explaining this as this part, meaning that, do you know who this is, Will? In ancient Sumer, in ancient Mesopotamia, Enki's counterpoint in the underworld. Yes, this entire depiction right here is the underworld. His counterpoint, because everybody just, if anyone's wondering, obviously Enki's in the underworld. Zayasudra went to the underworld to meet up with, or Zayasudra was in the underworld, and then Gilgamesh went to meet up with him there because that's where the realm of Enki is. So positive, negative. Now, who is this? This is not Toshiba. I had made a mistake in my past because they had tried to create the lens, the Urartians and others, as this being solar depictions. It's not. This is the underworld, meaning that who is this? For everyone listening, this is Nergal. This is his counterpoint in the underworld. He is the god of death, the god of war. He's his opposite. They must maintain that, which means in the celestial realms, do you know who Enki's counterpoint is? Marduk, and his counterpoint is Enlil. So the reason why Enlil is a negative god above is that you have to have negative and positive below and negative positive below above. Each realm of reality has to have that. So that's how we can essentially understand is that you have underworld, duat, middle door, physical reality, and celestial higher realms. Both of these are non-physical. I cannot express that enough. Non-physical realms of reality. They together manifest physical reality. Now, Enki right here, or Haldi, is passing the seeds of knowledge to the tree of life. The tree of life is a metaphor also for consciousness. They believe that everything is one and everything is connected and that there is no separation. And I'll explain how I know that that's what it means. So there he's passing that. The cup or the chalice means a spiritual or religious doctrine, meaning it's a metaphysical, spiritual teaching. And then right above him, above his head, he has a circle here. And the circle represents life. And we'll get into how we know that. Now, he's manifesting this into physical reality in the center, right here. Above that is the manifestation of ascension into 7 spokes that flower like the 7 chakras will. And on each side are the 2 guardians of those realms of reality with 2 rabbits that they're holding, which represent balance and fertility. And so you have this blossoming. And so what is this? It's basically only the most important relief in the world that depicts the path of ascension and how everything is balanced. And we're going to get into how we know all of these in as we go along, because it's based on a whole set of teachings that revolve around Hermeticism and natural law. And that's how we get here. Now, Will, based on Egyptian knowledge, you then understand that if both of these symbols are these combination, because it's not, I guess you really wouldn't say it's one symbol, right? Because it's 3 doors, 3 upright pyramids, 3 inverted pyramids, and then the T. Mm-hmm. But you really would kind of put them into 2 categories. So having said that, now we can go through it. Well, imagine here you have a mirroring of 3 realms of reality. See, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and the same mirroring on the other counterpart. Well, the T is essentially all of that together, but it represents balance. That's what it is. Its symbol itself means balance. That's why they encoded it into the entire temples. So it means that you take the step pyramids, the 3 doors, and you condense them into a single symbol. But the symbol only is used when it represents balance. So the vertical or middle door, being the tallest, always the biggest, is the vertical axis. Then the horizontal left is Underworld. Remember, door is left side, see? Left,
Yeah.
Underworld, Duat, right, Celestial Upper Realms. It all is coming down. And so what is this? It is the most advanced ancient code ever left behind, in which they are giving us the knowledge of everything. And I've just begun. I have a whole bunch more to add to this. But here is a great way to look at it. See the middle door, Will? Always the biggest, because the left and right always manifest physical reality. And so here we are. If anyone's wondering, this is the Gate of the Sun in Bolivia. This is Tiwanaku. And they're all encoding the same thing over and over again, everywhere. It's the same thing. All over the world, they are encoding the structure of the universe into these, but also creating what are called realm gateways. And well, trust me, we'll be getting that in a second.
What's blowing my mind also right here is that I'm seeing, and especially in what you had just showed as well with Enki, this parallel that I'm seeing all over. It's carried its way throughout so many different other cultures. I see it in the chakra system. I see it in the Kabbalah. I see it in the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. Right. Now my brain is going to miss all of these, but the point being essentially that this encompassing, we can't seem to escape this. If this is the origin of that, everything that's flowered off of it has been an attempt to simply display this that we've forgotten, and so I think I find it insane that it was the original, that this has been encoded everywhere, and it tells us how important it is. But understanding that it all has to do with balance, which is also another thing that you find with the chakras, you find within the Kabbalah system, finding that middle path, right? And Taoism was where I was also going to go as well.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that this is if they had to encode one thing, if they had to encode, if we have to pass down some knowledge, what is it that we're gonna pass down? Well, this is the most important. This is the thing that we need you to understand. It's otherworldly, So go ahead. You were going to just now describe where this is going to flower out to.
And the beautiful thing, Will, just to add on what you said just briefly, is that, remember, they were masters at tracking cycles. And I firmly believe that they understood that they were all going to be destroyed. And it's so poetic and beautiful and sombering, is that they encoded the most important knowledge necessary, and I haven't even gone through the rest of it yet, the most important knowledge necessary so that their entire philosophy and everything they built, everything they encoded and understood about the universe and philosophy and how everything works, that could never be lost again, so that could survive the test of time. And that's what we are now bringing back right now. That's what this all is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's incredible. Okay. And so I want to just add this because, again, what this civilization encoded is the most beautiful thing you could ever imagine. And so let's go back to Van. In Turkey, you have 3 sites that show 3 flowers that is so beautiful to represent the 3 doors. So remember this. Now imagine they created 3 flowers to represent each one. It's so beautiful. And 3 structures too. So first thing is, you have the Underworld Temple, which is what the underwater temple is. And I'll show in 1 second why I know that is. But it forms a perfect circle. And its flower is unique. It's not the same as Ionis or Keph, but they're all associated temples together. They all have a relationship. They all play a part in a macro-micro relationship, meaning that, look at the flower that's on the underwater ruins. They're seeds. They're not the same thing. They're like seeds of a flower. Why? Because the tree of life and nature the origins is the underworld. That's where life is. So they're depicting seeds of life because the tree grows from there. Okay? The next thing is, look at the Ionis flower. It's a celestial sunflower. You see that, Will? a sunflower, because it represents the right door, the celestial realms. And then the last flower of them all, I love this, Will. Middle door flower, can't get any better than this. The middle door represents the structure of reality. Structure is a tetrahedron flower. How beautiful is that, Will?
That's awesome.
Each one represents the fractal nature of what they are. It's like, it's so beautiful. Is each realm of reality has a different flower that represents what they mean. And then they encode it all into this. That's the kind of layering we're talking about. Everything has meaning. Now, let's continue another layer. You see this right here? This is a counterclockwise spiral. And even though this one's gone, based on what I'm calling the blueprint, which is basically their code system, we know what that is even though it's gone. Including we can know other temples that have been dismantled and taken away, because this unlocks a model of understanding, which means, Will, if this is a counterclockwise swirl, what do you think that one is?
Then it's clockwise.
Yes. Why? Because they're talking about the expansion and contraction of the universe. It's everything. It's literally the structure of the universe, how it functions. We're talking about everything. Now, we're going to get into this, and this is going to continue to blow people's minds, because based on what I'm calling the blueprint, which is what they left behind of how everything works, and how the mirroring, the symmetry, the symbols, the guardians, the celestial versus underworld, what each symbol is, all of it. It means that the Urartians dismantled the underworld Susi temple. They dismantled it. And how do we know? Because they moved over all of the alabaster floor pieces and the altar to the outside of the temple, because they built the castle, and then they dismantled the other Susi temple. Why? Because they turned Hali into a war sun god. Who is he originally? Remember Hali on that depiction of the Kef bas-relief? He has a circle right on his head because he represents a god of the underworld. That's why. And they did not want that underworld temple and did not want that association with him as a underworld god, so they literally dismantled it. Now, based on the blueprint and understanding how everything has to be in twos, everything is a symmetry, everything's based on this balance concept, we can actually figure out where, we know where it was, but we could literally rebuild it. We could rebuild it based on this. And now, what are these? I firmly believe, Will, that this is how Gilgamesh got to the underworld. I kid you not. The only gateway. That's what these are. They're gateways to the other doors, guys. That's what their purpose is. They're literally designed to be metaphysical gateways so you can go there consciously, not physically.
Whoa, I got to interrupt you. you. Okay, so you're telling me kind of like this would be, and obviously, like you said, these are metaphysical, non-physical realities, the upper and lower, which are then creating our physical reality, but these are gateways in order to get there. Are you stating then the conduit to get there, you said consciousness, is that getting into an altered state, being able to then utilize?
Yes, we are the final component. And I'll explain it when I get into the technologies, that consciousness and humans are the final piece that's needed. We are an integral part in all of this. It's a technology that uses consciousness and what's called piezoelectric properties of stones, and other alchemical type of things as well, including that the altar had gold rods in increments built into it. There's a whole entire concept here of alchemy and ancient stones, and basically what is like magic that we don't understand. They had forms of technology that are completely different, that connected to the universe. Our technology is almost silly compared to theirs.
Okay, because that's what we've always suspected. I've at least always suspected. I know we talked about this in our stuff. What if humanity took a sharp turn left? Now we're headed towards transhumanism. We would at least in technology and a distance from nature. Well, what about a society that lived, the opposite and had, let's say, 20,000 years of thriving? What would they have done? Well, they would use what is ultimate consciousness and remember and stick with nature and understand that consciousness is fundamental, and they would have technology that would be intertwined with that.
Well, yeah, but not only that, but they realize that it's an essential component of all of it. And I'm going to get into it in a minute, is that they realize that the human is a fractal of the entire source conscious field of the universe, and that we are an expression of source itself, like a direct expression that is very fundamentally important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And again, we're going to get into this, but look, how do you know what I'm saying here? Look, over and over again, you repeat the flame, the holy flame, and the spoke of the sun over and over and over again. That's what it means. It's a holy flame, the sun. We'll get into it. But that's what this is repeating, because this is a celestial Susi temple. That's what its purpose is. That's why all the guardians have wings. Look, the lion. The lion is right there, everyone, right here. This is the lion. This is the eagle. This, and then they're repeating, and then the human. So there's 3 guardians of each realm, right? You have them repeating over and over again for each one. That's what it's beautiful, actually. And now this is where we get into the heart, everyone. This is where you got to take notes. If you don't think that we've come exciting to a place where it was complex, this is where we truly go down the rabbit hole. Get ready. Now, this is where I would consider the most important of all the breakthroughs I ever made, even more than Cosmogram. This right here. Because of one specific thing, is that this is what links all of Hermeticism and the Kabbalion. This is it, right here. This is your link if we want to understand how they understood the universe, how all these esoteric mysticism, how all that plays a part, right here. Now, each Susi temple had an altar. We have 2 altars, which means the other one was the other Susi temple, in which, of course, they dismantled, which I want to rebuild, and someday. And this altar right here, both altars would have been exactly the same, though, because that's how the model works, the blueprint. Yeah. They have to be identical. Right. But there's 2 symbols on the altar, not one. 2 symbols that repeat over and over and over again. Now, this is the altar at Ionis, okay? This is the heart of everything. This is the focus. This is how I believe the technology of a realm gate existed, or that you would lay on the altar, because the altar itself was a T. I'm sure you're not surprised by that, Will.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Okay. Now, on the left, I want to show this. This is a depiction of what the altar looks like if you were to have it drawn out. And this is a rod that has the spirals like the underwater ruins, see? And the 2 symbols in the altar repeating. This is the only gold rod that survived that goes into the bottom of the altar. This is in the Von Museum. They only found one, well, because it's gold, and the Urartians must have used the rest of it. Yeah. So, okay. So the altar has 3 guardians repeating over and over again. Now, you can see these guardians. Now, look closely. This is where it gets really exciting. See how it's an eagle? There's your eagle, on just like the Kef. This is the realm. This guards the celestial realms, right? Eagles fly the highest. Then you have Haldi right here. He is like the human version of the knowledge bringer, who represents like the middle door guardian, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you have the other guardian of the underworld realms, basically, which is like kind of like you could kind of call him a little bit like a dragon god, or he's a combination that, because we would think of this as a griffin in ancient Greece, right? The griffin combines the lion with the eagle. And so you're getting the lion combined here with what is almost like a dragon. So they're the 3 guardians of the 3 realms of reality, okay? Now, if we were to try to understand where the lion comes in, that's the lion. So it's like a lion dragon. That's what it's like, okay? So eagle, lion, and then the human. 3 different realms of reality, 3 gateway guardians. Now, within this, they are guarding only 2 things, Will, that repeat. Okay. The 2 things that repeat is a flame and a circle. Over and over again on this altar. There's the flame. You want to see it in real life. There's the circle. Now, the circle right here is exactly the same symbol that's above Haldi's head. Here. Same symbol that's above his head because he's the god of preservation and life. So that's how we know, okay? And then the flame is what's called the holy flame. Now, how do we know these? This is where I literally had a heart attack also. I know I've had a lot of heart attacks, but this is that moment where you're like, oh my God, this is too good to be true. This artifact is from a place called Ollantaytambo. Same repeating flame and circle over and over again, right? All three are all Susi temple. They're all Susi temple sites. Now, I am a deep study of Hermeticism. I have anyone who watches the shows, I've talked about this passage. I've been obsessed with this passage for years because I recognize that it was the most important passage echoed of anything in Hermeticism, period. If there was one takeaway that it focuses on, it's this. So what is this? Well, it's a famous story in the Hermetica called Poimander the Great Dragon. Now, in this depiction, the dragon represents the mind of God. So it's essentially like source, okay?
Yeah.
And Hermes, in the story, and Hermes is the equivalent of Thoth in Egypt. He's a messenger. He's just like Enki. He has a conversation with God, okay? And it's source. And he says, I want to understand the nature of God and man, okay? And so the great dragon says, well, the nature of the father of all things, God, is the same as man. They are made of the same thing. That's the first thing to take away, is that we are made of the same thing as God, source, that we are a fractal of God. And what are those two things? Life and light. The two most important things in all of Hermeticism, okay? And they are the very two symbols that repeat over and over again on the altars. Okay, that's not a coincidence. And not only that, but if life is the circle, and then you get a perfect circle of the underwater ruins, they're embodying the fractal nature of what that concept means and designing temples to be it. As above, so below, as within, so without. There is no separation. And so what do they do? What is the holy flame then, Will? Right there. If one of the Susi temples was for the underworld, see? Look, now do you understand? Look, right here. These two symbols, this right there is a symbol for the ray of a sun, and that is the holy flame. It's a celestial temple to the holy flame. That's what Ionis is. It's literally the most important ancient temple in the world. And then its counterpart temple, right? The circle of life, the temple life, would have been its counterpart Susi temple. And we know that it was there because there's buttress pillars surrounding nothing right now. And of course, all the alabaster floors and all that stuff was removed. But so now you have the same repeating symbols that prove that Hermeticism is the origins of all of this knowledge, right? The Kabbalion, all of that is an origin from this. That's what all esoteric mysticism is based on, and this proves it. This now gives us a direct link. So what is it all? Well, now we can break it all down. Hermes and Thoth are guardians of sacred knowledge. Their entire purpose is like Enki. It's to be preservers of knowledge when systems and that knowledge is being threatened. There is a balance that has to always be maintained here. Those guardians maintain that balance, if that makes sense. The Anuna are what we call guardians of balance, and they're administrators of cycles. They're cycle masters. They're cycle masters of the universe. They're fractal sources of God. And you can think of us more like actors on the great stage of the universe. That's what we are. We're acting in a great play. All of the world is a stage. We're all playing roles. And we forgot our roles, though, unfortunately. And so we now get direct connections to Hermes, to Thoth. The whole thing unlocks. You now realize all knowledge, all philosophy, all knowledge into the ancient cultures, mysticism, esoteric traditions, it all came from this. They are simply the remnants of the greatest civilization that ever existed in our history. Okay. And all their depictions show no war. They show complete harmony and all balance. They show a direct relationship of the universe and Earth. Now, and let's get into it. For all those listening to this, I'm going to read this out because some people really like audio and I think it's important. So it's all based on what's called Hermeticism. This existed before Christianity, and of course, we're going to go down that road too. I have to speed it up because I am running out of time. So Hermeticism is a philosophical tradition concerned with the underlying order of reality itself. It teaches that the universe operates according to consistent principles that link mind, nature, and cosmos, and that these principles can be understood through symbolism, geometry, and observation, rather than belief or doctrine. So remember that. It's a system of universal principles that govern all of reality itself. Reality, according to their understanding, is ordered, intelligent, interconnected. Knowledge is conveyed through symbolism and allegory. The emphasis is on harmony between consciousness, nature, and the cosmos. Encoded into sacred texts, geometry, and the architecture of these temple layouts. Do you understand, Will?
Not only does all of this make sense, it is almost like this is the gold of what everyone essentially is searching for. It reminds me of Prisca theology, or I can't remember this term that was floating around the Renaissance period, where that search for but not theosophy. There's a Prisca theologia. Someone in the comments will definitely put it there. My Latin is awful, but this search for the religion that would encompass essentially everything, that it could explain everything in this.
Yes.
This Hermeticism does this in the way that you've presented this, and with this being most likely the truth, that balance, and that their search for a complete, that we are not a separate portion of the universe. We are the universe. We've lost the plot in many ways, right? We as the humans, right? I mean, it leads me to such another, and we're going to have another podcast, and literally we should just have another podcast next week to talk about the implications of this. And I'm serious, because now that you've presented in many ways what this is.
I'm not even done yet. Yeah.
I know you're not. I know you're done. We can even do a part 2. No one that's a fan of our stuff is going to be bored of ever talking about this. We could probably do a podcast every day, but yeah, I'll leave it at that, because yes, it does make a whole lot of sense. And I know that balance and the T, obviously what this is displaying for us is something that I have thought it's echoed in all of these religions, in all of these cultures. It has to be more important than what we give it now today.
It's everything. It's what humanity has lost and been searching for thousands of years. It gives meaning back to every single thing in our existence. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even end there. Are you ready we're going to go down even a way more incredible rabbit hole now. This is where people are going to understand how it was lost. Okay? How it was lost so we never lose it ever again. The entire Renaissance of the 15th century was because of this. If this is going to make so many bells go off in people's heads to understand how this was lost because of this. So let's go through it. People may not understand, but the Renaissance actually came out of a very interesting set of events. So in 1453, Constantinople, which is the famous city in the center of the world in Western Turkey that became Istanbul, it was collapsing. You're seeing the Ottoman Empire conquer it, and it was collapsing, and you're seeing the rise of Christianity during that period. So what happened was, in the mid 1400s, an enormous amount of the people that had been living in that part of the world, that had been practicing Hermeticism, decided to leave and go somewhere else because it was no longer an environment that was conducive for that. Again, the Byzantine Empire emerging out of that region was threatening all of Hermeticism. So what did they do? A huge group of people from Eastern Greece, Western Turkey, that whole area, hundreds of people, and we don't even know the full number. They all went to one place in Europe, all of them. They all went to Florence, Italy, every single one of them. And in Florence, Italy, that's where the Hermetica was first translated. And once the Hermetica was translated into into the Florence, into the people there, it created the entire Renaissance movement of our culture. Think about it. Philosophy, art, a flourishing of the human experience, Da Vinci, all of it came out because of this. And then what happened? Da Vinci paints the 3 doors with the middle door in the Last Supper. Look at this, guys. You can't argue this anymore. The Vitruvian man, the perfect man that represents the balance of the universe, they understood. Da Vinci understood. And he was trying to get us to understand. And that's what the 3 Supper is depicting, is the 3 doors. That's why the middle is the biggest. That's why Jesus is sitting in the middle door, just like Enki Haldi is passing the knowledge to the middle door. It's the same thing. It's been right in front of us all along. So what happens? Here's the saddest part of all. Everybody taking notes? Isaac Casaubon, welcome into the mix. One of the most evil men that no one's ever heard of. Isaac Casaubon gets hired by the Christian church to discredit the Hermeticism. So he studies the Hermeticism, and he's an expert on ancient text. He figures out that during ancient Alexandria in Egypt, that the initiates and scribes there had rewritten it over and over again, but that the version they were using was written during Alexandria, and that the teachings of Moses were older. So he's trying to say it was first written during that, and is not based on anything older at all, but that its actual origin of Hermetica came after the teachings of Moses. Mm-hmm. What he tricked everybody on is that the Hermetica and Hermeticism has been carried down and translated for thousands of years by everyone from the Greeks, from the Egyptians all the way to the Greeks, and that its original base knowledge was from this civilization that we're exploring. It's the oldest knowledge on Earth. So he discredits the Hermeticism, and then what happens? The church destroys and burns everyone at the stake that's a pagan or a druid. Anyone practicing Hermeticism for the next several hundred years gets burned alive and killed. They destroy Hermeticism and natural law. That's what all of it was. That's why witches were being burned. That's why St. Patrick was going into Ireland and destroying all the snakes. They were all the pagans that were following this. Mm-hmm. That's what happened in history. Give a moment for that sad, sombering time of our history. That's why we became so disconnected after. That's why after this, you had the birth of the most violent time in human history. Why, Will? Because monotheistic religions took away the blueprint of the universe and how everything worked, and then created their own rules.
Which is sad, because that's still where we're fighting back against today, even having to deal with, is there a non-physical realm, how you should stay connected to nature, all of the rest of those things. We're still even fighting for whether or not they exist, rather than what we could be utilizing our own consciousness to connect with, etc.
But it's worse than that, because then the monotheistic church blocks off the underworld, the source of life and a lot of knowledge, and they close off what is a path of ascension, which is below and above. So we're going to get into that in a second. But first, natural law. Natural law is what Hermeticism is. It's based on natural law. Natural law refers to the inherent principles that govern nature and reality. It's independent of human authority or belief. I can't state that enough. What I found is not my belief. It cannot be disproved. That's the whole point. It's not anything to do with me. I just found what they left us. These laws are not created, but discovered, revealed through pattern, proportion, and cause and effect, observable through the natural world. Universal principles embedded into nature itself, exist independently of culture, belief, or power. Observable through pattern, proportion, and order, govern cycles, balance, and cause and effect. Expressed across scales, from cosmos to human systems. There is no separation of anything in the universe. Understood through reason, observation, and synthesis. Look, this is it. It's time for us to understand what we are. Everything is a fractal. Everything. The human lung is like a tree. Human eye is like a nebula. The birth of a human cell is like the birth of a star. A brain cell is the universe. We are the microcosm, the small version of the macrocosm of the entire universe. They understood that, which is why they understood what's called fractal geometry. That's what they're encoding. Fractal geometric cosmograms. That's what all these are. So what is fractal geometry? Fractal geometry describes patterns in nature that repeat itself across different scales, where the structure of the whole is reflected in its parts. Rather than a linear or isolated forms, fractal reveals a universe built on self-similarity, recursion, and nested order, visible from the microscopic to the cosmic. Patterns repeat across multiple scales. The part reflects the whole. Structures are recursive, not linear. Found throughout nature, plants, rivers, coastline, galaxies, emphasizes relationship and proportion, not symmetry alone. Fractals show that complexity emerges from repeating rules. Okay? They left this for us so that we could find our way back. This is everything. This will transform every single thing in humanity. Look, a fingerprint is the same as a core of a tree. A river is the same as a blood cells inside of us. Look, a shell, same of a galaxy, same as a hurricane. It's been in front of us all along. So, as we're concluding now, remember, there is no separation. As above, so below. As within, so without. The body is a temple. Consciousness in society is a temple. You must balance the temple within, and then you must create and balance the temple without. It has always been the same thing. That is the core of Freemasonry. That's why the first 13 presidents of the United States were Freemasons. They were trying to recreate this. That's the whole point. It's been here all along. Okay? And now look, what is the blueprint? What did I find? It's literally what all of this is. It's an understanding of reality itself, revealing that the same principles shaping the universe also govern nature, life, and human creation. Rather than separating humanity from the cosmos, the blueprint shows humans are participants within a coherent, living system, capable of recognizing, mapping, and working in harmony with it. Reality is structured by universal principles, not randomness. I emphasize that. We've been taught the opposite in every way. That we're meaningless and nothing, and that nothing is connected, and that you don't matter. It's the very opposite. Okay? Look, the same patterns repeat across cosmic, natural, and human scales. Geometry, proportion, and pattern from a shared language. Humans historically understood and encoded this symbolically into temples and stones, into their world. We forgot.
Yeah.
That's why they created the pyramids. Ready? The Great Pyramids, 3. The triptych within us, mind, body, and soul. The 3 pyramids represents a triptych, Earth, Sun, and Moon. What's the other triptych? Orion's Belt. It's always been about creating a triptych synergy between everything else. Always. So the last question we get back to now from where we started, not who were we, but who are we? And who are we about to discover that we were? And how much is this about to change? Philosophy, religion, spirituality, how we live in reality, what we do, the jobs we do, how we treat the earth, the universe, what we feel when we look up in the night sky, what we feel when we touch the earth, a tree. We now have the very mechanism and the means to find our way home and find our way back to a place that we have lost and become disconnected to so long ago. And that's such a beautiful thing, isn't it, Will?
It's unreal. Unreal. I had no idea. And now I understand what you meant by you didn't know that you were going to be getting into Hermeticism when you thought that you were just seeing a few things on your little poster, just thinking, oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, well, these are just some signs there. I am blown away, man. Where is this? Where is this?
This is part of the book and documentary. I identified 3 temples in Cambodia that were completely separate from the rest of the Khmer Empire that had the exact same symbols above much older temples that were not Khmer. So we explored all of them. This is Nam Bakang, it's called. And then the other temples that have it are called Nam Krom and Bap Phuan. And we found the same symbols, the same codex around the world. And that's what this is, Cambodia. And it shows you that it's been encoded all along and we just haven't been paying attention.
See, now we have to, and I don't think anyone is going to object to this. We have to go into. First off, obviously, you go through all of this in your book, which I haven't had a chance, obviously, to read with my travels. But we have to get into the implications of this. I'm sitting here next to one form of my library where Tesla has an obsession with, of course, the number 3, as everyone knows.
3, 6, and 9, which is what this is repeating over and over again.
Exactly, which is
the same code.
Right. And so we have to get into the implications of what this means specifically and the practical nature of what this means to the everyday person. That's what I want to. Can we please do a part 2? Can we please?
Part 2, I'm sure the audience listening to this is going to want part 2 for sure.
Oh, we got to do it. We got to do it soon because you know how my brain works. I mean, especially first off, the way that you've laid this out is incredible. And I think everybody is going to have to go through, listen to it again, right? And let it just burn into their heads, everything that is, that you've just kind of put across. But besides that point, what this leaves now for what else is to be discovered, you're going to find more. I know that this you're not done at all. So there's going to be more. There's going to be more correspondences. There's going to be more things. There's going to be more cultures that you're going to uncover way, way, way more. Right? It never ends. But we really have to dig into these implications and for what that actually is going to look like for the everyday person. It's mind blowing. It suggests a complete different way of living. Completely different.
Imagine me. Seeing all of that, realizing what I found and being like, having that holy shit moment of like, oh my God. I had moments during this where brought me to tears, bending down on the ground. Like, are you serious? Like this
wild
is like, I'm being given the ability to give this back. Like the humbleness and gratitude of being a part of what is more important than this? There is nothing.
No, there's nothing. No, there's
this
nothing.
Is everything.
No, this should be the front.
This is what's going to bring humanity back into balance, into harmony, is this. And look what happened without it, Will. Mm-hmm. Look at what happened to humanity once we lost this. Look at what we became. That doesn't define us, though. We were never supposed to be this, Will.
Yeah, and which is what I'm saying, hence why it's so important for us, because we talked about even other things from before. Yes, the phones and et cetera, these all things are good. Everything is great. They can be good tools. And, you are at the end of the day going to determine what it is that you do with that phone, this thing. But which is why, like you're saying, where did we lose our way? How important is this? Well, we need to make sure that people understand. Right. This is a good, people have to understand. It's because we can just watch this and look like that's cool. Hermeticism is cool. Boom. Netflix, get my brain programmed in a certain way and just kind of continue on. We have that danger. And so I'm really looking forward to us going even deeper on that in a certain way. Now that the basis has been laid out and that people can understand this is what's up now. All right. And so I think everybody who's watching this is also going to want to, put their hands into this. This is a type of technology and consciousness where you are that technology. Yes. You're going to want to dig into that, activate that, utilize that in your own life. What does that mean more? And so, listen, thanks guys. Everybody, obviously I know this is going to be all over our channels and stuff like this. So, check the links, check all the descriptions, grab the book, which is going to go into more stuff that we couldn't obviously get into in this couple hours that we did. And I know there's going to be more coming. Maybe you just want to, is there a little teaser other than the fact that we're going to go over? Yeah,
sure. I'll give a couple little, where we're going now, what we're doing, all of this. So when I came across this, obviously I couldn't just talk about it on a podcast because it's a really big discovery. It's huge. Its implications are staggering. So I had to finish the book. I had to protect all of this in the book. And honestly, I'm not just trying to peddle the book. My heart and soul went into the missing key. Honestly, this lays all of it out to preserve it, so that if something happens to me tomorrow, that this will survive, and that this will still be planted to grow, and that it won't ever be lost again. So that's what that book is. My heart and soul, the journey, it's everything. The discovery, it's everything in one. And so people have already given such great feedback and really loved it. And I'm very proud. It's by far the most important thing I've ever created is that book. And to me, it's a legacy, which I'm hoping this ends up being between you and I as well, because these are laying this foundation for humanity, laying it down. And the second thing I want to mention is that I have a whole lifetime now of trying to now explain this and the implications for it, for society. And we keep this whole idea of citizen archaeology that started because of this, not just me, but other people finding things. I want this to be like a movement that takes off. You could be someone that finds the next piece of this. You just have to go look at site layouts and find the same patterns and everything. And we're all in this together. Humanity is about to go down a road where everything is going to change and transform. This can't be stopped. You can't put this back. There is no going back. It is over. The lost civilization debate, it's over. Who we are, what we were once connected to, and what our origins are and what we're based on, it's over. We have it now. Yeah. Now we need to make sure we utilize it the right way, and everyone realizes we're a steward in this. We're a steward of Earth. We're a steward of the universe. It's time for us to step up, remember who we are once again, remember our power, and remember all that we've lost and who we can become once again.
Incredible,
well, let me just mention one more thing here, before I jump here, is that because of this, we now had to delay the filming of the documentary. We are going to Egypt May 1st with the whole team because we have to film this now. It's now a huge part of the documentary to end it. And there's already been a lot of call outs for potentially a Missing Key 2, not only a book, but a documentary, which goes to Iran, Saudi Arabia, all these places we couldn't go to. And so there's a lot of expeditions, exploring, working with archaeologists at places like Ionis to uncover like where did all the blocks for the other Susi temple go, right? There's so much now that we can put back together and understand based on this and recreate their world. I think it's never really been about necessarily just becoming them, but I think because we're already a hybrid that's different, but it is about incorporating the best aspects of what they were into us. Because here's the truth, Will, is that the trajectory we're going on right now, I think that's the whole reason why this is emerging now. Because the balance and harmony and what was going forward was threatened, this emerges always during age changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, anybody that can't feel what seems to be like an awakening, you'd have to say that you're truly, truly ignorant of what's happening within the consciousness and the zeitgeist currently, because it does feel like this is the type of stuff that is happening. People are becoming awake. This sort of movement is happening, and like you said, it just once you learn it, you can't unlearn, and it also it acts like a good virus of its sort. It just once it infects our consciousness, it takes off, man. It takes off, and you just get that itch. Oh, I love this.
And I want to say one last thing is that this is the kind of thing that it's only a matter of time. It's not about whether it integrates in. It's only about how long it takes. And I keep saying this. I'm going to say it one more time. This is a call out to every great mind, everyone in the world, that this is our story. We need to piece this together. All of the Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Cox, all these high-level individuals out there, it's time for us to pay attention to this. I need to get this in front of those people so that we can now move forward instead of spinning in the same thing we've been doing forever. This gives us everything back that matters.
Yeah, you're giving me ideas. I hope they would be open to it. That's the type of conversation that I would want to be engaging in. I want to be right in the middle of them, trying to understand and seeing them make their minds open to it, because part of it has been, some people suppressing it and other people not willing to look at it. Not that they're against it. They're just not willing to look.
Get me in a room with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Cox and give me 30 minutes and we'll have a whole new future ahead of us.
I like a challenge. Everybody knows if you're follow me.
I am confident enough on this that I will not debate, have a conversation
Sure.
with
We've done it
any
before.
academic in the world, period. And that is a challenge to all those out there, is let's do it.
All right. Done deal. All right. Well, so looking forward to part 2, guys. Everybody check everything out. Matt, this is awesome. I'm obviously going to go through this even before it comes out to kind of take things in. But we'll set things up for part 2, and then we'll get you Neil deGrasse Tyson and Matt LaCroix.
Let's do it. I'm all for these really great debates and discussions, because we have lost that ability just to have conversations and say, look, this is what the evidence is. Remember, science is an objective search for truth. Let's remember what the basis of that is as we move forward again. That's what this renaissance is. So the last statement I'll say is this new renaissance, it's a different kind of renaissance and revolution. It's a revolution of thought. It's a revolution of thought and minds, and it's about us taking back our sovereignty and our consciousness with the universe. We don't need to wait for any specific academic to tell us any longer.
That's another great point too, especially when it's staring us straight in the face. Like I said, there's really not much to go. You can't really hide from these sort of discoveries. You only have to figure out what they mean. So awesome, Matt. Appreciate it as always. Can't wait for part 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. But we'll make that. We'll make them happen. And
Sounds good.
yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you later.